Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. I have spent the last few, well probably 2 weeks really, going through the first Twilight book, dismantling it page by page. So that is what we're going to do today. Strap in, strap on. I have a feeling this is going to be a really long video. Before we get into that, let me get rid of all the self-promo shit. Like, dislike, comment for the engagement, subscribe, resubscribe if you've been unsubscribed by the YouTube glitch. Consider subscribing if you're new here. This is probably the most effort I've ever put into a video, so I really want it to be worth it. Also, I'd love to hit 200k on this channel sometime, so subscribe. Also, I have a second channel, I have a podcast channel, so subscribe to that as well. I'll put the relevant links wherever, and follow us on iTunes and Spotify. Also, we have a sponsor for today's video. The sponsor is Wren. Wren is a website where you can calculate your carbon footprint and then offset it by helping fund projects such as planting trees or protecting the rainforest. It's an incredibly easy way of doing something to help the climate crisis. All you'll need to do is answer a few questions about yourself and then you'll be told your carbon footprint plus ways to reduce it. No one can live a carbon footprint-free life, but you can offset the rest of it after you reduce some. After you sign up to make a monthly donation, you will also get updates so you can find out what your money is being spent on, how transparent. If you've chosen tree planting, you'll be able to see where your trees are planted, what the money is spent on. It's very lovely. It's like having a tree at home, except better. Perfect for people who live in cities and dream of owning trees. It's going to take every little helps to combat the climate crisis, so you can check out more information on wren.co. And my partnership with Wren means that we will plant 10 extra trees for the first 100 people who sign up using my referral link. Find out more on wren.co. Thank you so much, Wren, for sponsoring today's video because this has been a headache. Let's get into it. Okay, everyone, are you ready? Have you got a drink? Are you going to be as thirsty as Bella? Who knows? Let's find out. Let me tell you, going into this, I was never more excited to read Twilight again. It's been a long time since I've read the first Twilight, and it did disappoint. So Twilight itself, I've noticed, has had a little bit of a renaissance, and that's why I want to do this video, because I think it's been wrongly put in the category of, hey, that actually wasn't so bad, people just mass bullied it because teenage girls like it. And whilst that is a thing, Twilight does not deserve to be put into that category, because Twilight, for a whole generation of teen girls, I can't even talk anymore because this has done my nutting. For a whole generation of teenage girls, Twilight glamorized abusive, toxic, codependent relationships and also just like weirdness. There was a lot of weirdness in the series. Therefore, I shall tediously go through each book in the series to prove that I am always right. But before we begin this video essay, I think we should take a closer look at books and the history of books and literature so we can understand the context of Twilight better. Books were first invented in 4132 BC when a Mesopotamian farmer... I'm joking, isn't it really annoying when video essays do that? Like, we know what books are. Anyway, I'd never given much thought to how I would die. Stunner of an opening line, instant club classic. The stakes are immediately high because death has been mentioned within the first 10 words. In fact, this entire preface does well to draw you in, because if you'd read the preface and none else and bought the book entirely on that basis, then you'd almost think that this was a good story. And that would have been your first mistake. The hunter smiled in a friendly way as he sauntered forward to kill me. Sauntered forward. Not very intimidating, is it? Like someone sauntering. Is that how you saunter? Is that what we're... I look like I'm made of spaghetti before it's been cooked. That's the end of the preface. We're excited. We're desperate to find out more. So many questions have arisen. Who is the narrator? Why is this hunter trying to kill her? Where did I put my car keys? The questions are endless. First chapter. Chapter 1. First sight. My mother drove me to the airport with the windows rolled down. It was 75 degrees in Phoenix. The sky a perfect cloudless blue. I was wearing my favourite shirt. Sleeveless. White eye. All I'm thinking right now is... I have long ebony black hair, that's how I got my name, with purple streaks and red tips that reach my mid-back and icy blue eyes like limpid tears. And a lot of people tell me I look like Amy Lee. A.N. if you don't know who she is, get the hell out of here. I'm not related to Gerard Way, but I wish I was because he's a major fucking hottie. My Immortal was more fun than Twilight. I was wearing it, the white eyelet lace, whatever that is. I was wearing it as a farewell gesture. My carry-on item was a parka. This is truly riveting stuff. This might just be the odyssey of modern day literature. In the Olympic Peninsula of northwest Washington state, a small town named Forks exists under a near constant cover of clouds. It rains on this inconsequential town more than any other place in the United States of America. I did a Google of this, and the rainiest state is Hawaii. Washington isn't even in the top 10 rainiest states of all time according to this worldatlas.com/article/the 10 wettest states in the United States of America. Stephanie Meyer, why must you turn my office into a house of lies? It was to Forks that I now exiled myself, an action that I took with great horror. I detested Forks. Our unreliable narrator here is, of course, Bella Swan, and she's not one theatrics, of course not. Willingly choosing to move to a different state is indeed on par with exile. It's just like that scene in The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, where Kovu gets exiled and they're singing Exile. Are they singing Exile? They're calling him a disgrace anyway. Evil as plain as the scar on your face. You don't fuck with this mind. Yes, it's just as bad as that, except maybe without the same level of emotional depth or jaunty music. My mum looks like me, except with short hair and laugh lines. All we have to go so far off of Bella's appearance is she's wearing a shirt, so this sentence means absolutely nothing to us. Thank you, Bella, for wasting my time. I stared at her wide, childlike eyes. How could I leave my loving, erratic, harebrained mother to fend for herself? Of course she had Phil now, so the bills would probably get paid. There would be food in the refrigerator. Why do I have so much problem saying refrigerator? I'm already uncomfortable in this seat and it's only been 16 minutes. Gas in her car, someone to call when she got lost, but still. What in the parentification am I reading? Bella gets on the plane, then she gets off the plane, and then she says that she has already said her goodbyes to the sun. Laughs in British. Bella's dad is called Charlie. He is a cop. He is like the sheriff of Forks or the chief or I don't know. And he bought Bella a truck. How nice. But Bella is a bitch about it because she's insufferable. And at this point, I was already done with her shit. And I think I'm like on the second page of my script. I don't mind. I want you to be happy here. He was looking ahead at the road when he said this. Charlie wasn't comfortable expressing his emotions out loud. I inherited that from him. So I was looking straight ahead as I responded. That's really nice, Dad. Thanks. I really appreciate it. No need to add that my being happy in Forks is an impossibility. He didn't need to suffer along with me, and I never looked a free truck in the mouth or engine. I know you're 17, but grow the fuck up. She complains about everything. It was beautiful, of course, I couldn't deny that. Everything was green. The trees, their trunks covered with moss, their branches hanging with a canopy of it, the ground covered with ferns. Even the air filtered down greenly through the leaves. Oh, that's nice. Finally, it was too green. An alien planet. Dabbing on the fucking environment because you're so miserable. Be quiet for the rest of the story, please. Bella surprises herself by liking the new truck and then she moves into Charlie's. She stares out of the bedroom window and she sheds a few tears because she's very deep and poetic and troubled and no one understands her. Except for one other deep, troubled, poetic person. Bella describes herself to us. She's not tanned or sporty like those other girls, but she is pale. My skin could be pretty. It was very clear, almost translucent looking. Ah yes, the impossibly high beauty standard of being able to see red flesh under all your layers of skin. Perfection. Now all I have in my head is, he is not one of us, he will never be a part of us. I didn't relate well to people my age. Maybe the truth was that I didn't relate to people, period. Maybe you're just annoying and that's why no one likes you. Maybe, right, if you go around smelling shit all the time, maybe it's under your shoe. Bella is very much not like people in her time. Well, we're told that anyway. We're told that she's not like the other people in her time period. You know, she's an old soul, which makes her perfect for Edward, who also is an old soul. Forget what I just said. It's nonsense because it's just not true. Throughout this series, everyone is obsessed with Bella. Supernatural, non-supernatural, everyone. It's whatever. She cries in bed later that night over a choice she made entirely of her own volition, but okay. Breakfast with Charlie was a quiet event. He wished me good luck at school. I thanked him, knowing his hope was wasted. Good luck tended to avoid me. Right, Bella, are you actually alright? Like, all jokes aside, are you okay? Because this level of negativity towards everything isn't healthy. It was impossible being in this house not to realise that Charlie had never gotten over my mom. Mom. It made me uncomfortable. This made me sad for a second, yeah, because we love Charlie, except for Charlie and Eclipse. Right, yeah, no, but Charlie's all right, except for Charlie and Eclipse. But then I remembered I know how it ends, so don't worry. Don't get sad. Don't get the tissues out just yet. Well, I suppose it depends what you're getting them out for. Why am I like this? Finding the school wasn't difficult, though I'd never been there before. The school was, like most things, just off the highway. It was not obvious that it was a school. Only the sign, which declared it to be the Forks High School, made me stop. Say school one more time. I'm Isabella Swan, I informed her, and saw the immediate awareness light her eyes. I was expected. A topic of gossip, no doubt. Daughter of the chief's flighty ex-wife come home at last. This has all the energy of Ryland Adams delightedly calling himself a hot topic that one time on his podcast, if you recall. Once I got around the cafeteria, building 3 was easy to spot. A large black 3 was painted on a white square on the east corner. I felt my breathing gradually creeping towards hyperventilation as I approached the door. I tried holding my breath as I followed 2 unisex raincoats through the door. We already know that Bella is a little bit prone for the melodrama, so did she actually breathe a little bit faster and just exaggerate the rest for fun, or does she genuinely need help? Vote in the comment section below. Tell me what you think. I took the slip up to the teacher, a tall, balding man whose desk had a nameplate identifying him as Mr. Mason. I've just realised how many words Stephanie Meyer uses to get points across. The books could have been half this size. He gawked at me when he saw my name, not an encouraging response, and of course I flushed tomato red. Why would a teacher gawk at a new student? Get a grip, Stephanie Meyer. Stop wanting people to overreact just for Bella existing. Bella is doing the bare minimum right now. Literally just existing, and everyone's like, go away. Also, it's a teacher, they've got to be professional. Like, shut up. I kept my eyes down on the reading list the teacher had given me. It was fairly basic. Bronte, Shakespeare, Chaucer, Faulkner. I'd already read everything. That was comforting. And boring. Teehee, these authors are so basic because unlike other girls, the impure ones, I read. I don't go out doing crack cigarettes and doing the sex. Boring. Yawn. When the bell rang, a nasal buzzing sound. Why is she dabbing on fucking bells? Literally complains about everything. A gangly boy with skin problems and hair black as an oil slick leaned across the aisle to talk to me. You're Isabella Swan, aren't you? He looks like the overly helpful chess club type. Bella, I corrected. Everyone within a 3-seat radius turned round to look at me. A boy just wants to help her and she just insults him internally. Bella is pretentious and insufferable. Get in the bin. So this boy remarks on how pale Bella is. My mother is part albino. He studied my face apprehensively and I sighed. It looked like clouds and a sense of humour didn't mix. A few months of this and I'd forget how to use sarcasm. Bella, you aren't funny, you're tacky and I hate you. One girl sat next to me in both Trig and Spanish. She walked with me to the cafeteria for lunch. She was tiny, several inches shorter than my 5 feet 4 inches. But her wildly curly dark hair made up a lot of the difference between our heights. I couldn't remember her name, so I smiled and nodded as she prattled on about teachers and classes. I didn't try to keep up. We sat at the end of a full table with several of her friends who she introduced to me. I forgot all their names as soon as she spoke them. They seemed impressed by her bravery in speaking to me. The boy from English, Eric, waved at me from across the room. People are going out of their way to be nice to Bella and she doesn't think that they're even worth committing their names to her memory. I mean, she doesn't even listen to them either. You know, most people when they move schools are worried about not being able to make new friends at said school. And here some girl is introducing, I believe it's Jessica, right? I think it's Jessica, is introducing her to her whole friend group, right? Doing the work for her. And she's just being like, oh, I can't remember their names, don't matter, does it? This is the protagonist that we are supposed to identify with and we're supposed to ultimately like. We're meant to give a shit about their existence, otherwise what's the point of reading the book? So maybe don't make your main character really unlikable if you want me to give a shit about them getting eaten or not. At this point, I'm on the hunter's side, the one from the preface. The guy probably read the first few chapters of Twilight and thought, fuck it, I'll be doing the world a favour. Bella then notices 5 people in the cafeteria who are daring to not obsess over her. Don't worry, Bella, by book 4, you'll be all of their top priority. So when it got to the description of Alice, I recalled somewhere, I remember someone saying that Alice basically has the body of a 14-year-old girl, and I thought, whilst, writing this script, that can't be right, so I looked it up to see if it was verified, because if so, bit weird, isn't it? But there's an entire backstory for Alice on the Twilight Wikipedia fandom page, and I was completely unaware of half of it, and it sounds like a much more interesting story than the story I'm actually reading. Anyway, back to this story. None of the vampires, the Cullens, are even trying to be human. They're not even pretending to try. They were all looking away from each other, away from the other students, away from anything in particular as far as I could tell. As I watched, the small girl rose with her tray, unopened soda, unbitten apple, and walked away with a quick, graceful lope that belonged on a runway. I watched amazed at her. I've never known how to pronounce this word. Life. There we go. Well, thank you, Twilight. I actually learned something. Life dancer's step till she dumped her tray and glided through the back door faster than I would have thought possible. My eyes darted back to the others who sat unchanging. How is Bella, the first student at Forks, on her first day no less, to work out there's something wrong with the Cullens? As she looked up to see who I meant, though already knowing probably from my tone, suddenly he looked at her, the thinner one, the boyish one, the youngest perhaps. He looked at my neighbour for just a fraction of a second, and then his dark eyes flickered to mine. He looked away quickly, more quickly than I could, though in a flush of embarrassment I dropped my eyes at once. In that brief flash of a glance, his face held nothing of interest. It was as if she had called his name and he'd looked up in involuntary response, already having decided not to answer. Subtlety is not Maya's forte. I glanced sideways at the beautiful boy who was now looking at his tray, picking a bagel to pieces with his long pale fingers. His mouth was moving very quickly, his perfect lips barely opening. The other 3 still looked away, yet I felt he was speaking quietly to them. This is another annoying thing, right, that Maya does with Bella. Bella is aware of things that she just shouldn't be aware of yet, realistically. Or maybe even at all. These are vampires, they're just not doing a good job at pretending they're fucking human. She finds out about the Cullens' names. Strange unpopular names, I thought. The kind of names grandparents had. But maybe that was in vogue here. Small town names? I finally remembered that my neighbour was called Jessica. A perfectly common name. There were 2 girls named Jessica in my history class back home. Dabbing on Jessica for something she had no choice in. Also, since when was Edward an unpopular name, even by today's standard? Well, maybe not now because of the Twilight boom, but even before then. I've known Edwards, Alice's. Stephanie just really needed Edward to be different and special, so he would be kind of evenly matched with Bella, who's also very different and special. That's Edward. He's gorgeous, of course, but don't waste your time. He doesn't date. Apparently none of the girls here are good looking enough for him. She sniffed, a clear case of sour grapes. I wondered when he'd turned her down. I bit my lip to hide my smile. Then I glanced at him again. His face was turned away, but I thought his cheek appeared lifted, as if he was smiling too. Again, here she is, Bella, being more perceptive than one just naturally would be. I know this point has been made a million times, but reading through it again, it just really struck me how ludicrous it is that eternal, immortal vampires would choose to do high school over and over. I don't like the excuse of, oh, it's so we can stay in the town longer. I don't like, it's just, why would they do that to themselves? They're all pushing, not all of them actually. A lot of them are pushing 100 and they're just doing high school again and again. Why not at least university so they could all get dozens of PhDs and actually do something useful with their time? Maybe then, if Bella had been 25 doing a PhD, the age gap between an 107-year-old vampire and a 17-year-old wouldn't have been so gross. Go away. I was anxious not to be late for class on my first day. One of my new acquaintances, who considerately reminded me that her name was Angela, had biology 2 with me next hour. We walked to class together in silence. She was shy too, considerately. What would have actually been more considerate is if Bella had bothered to listen to people when they spoke to her. Also, I like the whole she was shy, too, as if Bella is just a brooding introvert that no one really understands. No, she's not a brood. I mean, yeah, she's probably introverted, but she's not brooding and deep because of it. She's genuinely just rude and lacks common decency to the citizens of Forks. Like, you're not worth her time unless you're supernatural. Anyway, Bella goes to class and Edward gets really big mad because her blood smells good. Spoiler alert, sorry. His eyes are black. This is very important to the plot. Anyway, she meets that Mike guy who fancies her straight away, like most of the guys in this book do. PE, physical education, is mandatory for 4 years in Forks, which makes this Bella's literal personal hell on earth. Oh my god, it's so relatable. Everyone hates physical education. Am I right, teens and tweens? She finishes gym and goes back to the school office to show the administrator some paperwork from her first day, but then she sees Edward Cullen. Gasp. He's trying to swap his biology class for a different time. Could this be because of Bella? The drama, the stakes, the irony. We're still only on chapter 1, I can't believe it. Edward Cullen's back stiffened and he turned slowly to glare at me. His face was absurdly handsome, with piercing, hate-filled eyes. For an instant, I felt a thrill of genuine fear raising the hair on my arms. The look only lasted a second, but it chilled me more than the freezing wind. He turned back to the receptionist. Yeah, right, so she's scared of him, genuinely in this moment, but still takes the time to notice how, dreamy he is. She goes home and tries not to cry. Chapter 2, Open Book. The next day was better and worse. These chapter openings really pack a punch, don't they? The mystery, the intrigue, I almost care, and that is the most praise I'm going to give Twilight. Mike walks Bella to her next class. Oh my god, this is so interesting. And Chess Club Eric, that boy, glares at Mike, and Bella finds this all very flattering. She's flattering, not flattering. I wish she was flattered. Flattened. I'm not okay, I need a drink. A stiff one of OJ. So Bella has found herself in a social clique very easily. Right, her day is worse because Edward Cullen wasn't in school at all. I had actually forgotten how quickly she begins to obsess over Edward, as if that's not a fucking red flag. Get a life, Bella. Go read some Emily Bronte or something. I walked to biology with more confidence when, by the end of lunch, he still hadn't showed. Mike, who was taking on the qualities of a golden retriever, walked faithfully by my side to class. How all the boys obsess over Bella, who's just rude, is beyond me. Then he smiled at me wistfully and went to sit by a girl with braces and a bad perm. Why was that necessary? Poor girl with the perm. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she likes it. Maybe she likes it. Bella is horrible. I was relieved that I had the desk to myself, that Edward was absent. I told myself that repeatedly, but I couldn't get rid of the nagging suspicion that I was the reason he wasn't there. It was ridiculous and egotistical to think that I could affect someone that strongly. It was impossible, and yet I couldn't stop worrying that it was true. Why is she worrying about being egotistical now when she's done nothing but be snobby towards her classmates? Charlie can't cook anything except fried eggs and bacon, and yet inexplicably it's his best friend who dies in New Moon from the heart attack. So anyway, Bella wants to be in charge of all the cooking because she is a good future Mormon wifey. Bella notices the Cullens. Blah blah blah, they could have worn dish rags and pulled it off. It seemed excessive for them to have both looks and money, but as far as I could tell, life worked that way most of the time. It didn't look as if it brought them any acceptance here. No, I didn't fully believe that. The isolation must be their desire. I couldn't imagine any door that wouldn't be opened by that degree of beauty. Bella, that is because you are incredibly superficial. She makes dinner and answers her mum's emails. What's funny is in the script I had said, go read Emily Bronte as a joke because I'm hilarious that way. But that's exactly what Bella goes and does. You don't fuck with this mind. I had decided to read Wuthering Heights, the novel we were currently studying in English, yet again for the fun of it. I am literally just better than Alice and Edward combined. Bella and Charlie chat and then Charlie simps for the Cullens. The kids, are a little different. They don't seem to fit in very well at school. Charlie surprised me by looking angry. People in this town, he muttered. Dr. Cullen is a brilliant surgeon who could probably work in any hospital in the world, make 10 times the salary he gets here, he continued, getting louder. We're lucky to have him. Lucky that his wife wanted to live in a small town. He's an asset to the community, and all of those kids are well behaved and polite. I had my doubts when they first moved in with all those adopted teenagers. I thought we might have some problems with them, but they're all very mature. I hadn't had one speck of trouble from any of them. That's more than I can say for the children of some of the folks who have lived in this town for generations. They stick together the way a family should, camping trips every other weekend. Just because they're newcomers, people have to talk. It was the longest speech I'd ever heard Charlie make. He must feel very strongly about whatever people were saying. Charlie, Dr. Cullen isn't gonna fuck you. I backpedaled. They seemed nice enough to me. I just noticed they kept to themselves. They're all very attractive, I added, trying to be more complimentary. You should see the doctor, Charlie said, laughing. It's a good thing he's happily married. A lot of the nurses at the hospital have a hard time concentrating on their work with him around. See? Charlie and Dr. Cullen, and I googled it, and yes, Charlie times Carlisle Cullen fanfics do exist, because of course they fucking do. Anyway, Bella settles into her new home and routine, yet Edward doesn't come back to school. Rip, I wish he stayed away. I did drive to the library Saturday, but it was so poorly stocked that I didn't bother to go get a card. I'd have to make a date to visit Olympia or Seattle soon and find a good bookstore. I wondered idly what kind of gas mileage the truck got and shuddered at the thought. The rain stayed soft over the weekend, quiet, so I was able to sleep well. Don't think I mock Twilight because I don't understand it. I do understand it. I understand the romanticisation of these stories. I know why they were so popular with teens. There's such a cosy vibe to it, living in this place of incredible greenery. Yeah, sure, it rains a lot, but hey, who doesn't love the sound of rain against the window when you're inside? You've got your own beat-up truck. You can find little bookstores off the beaten track, yeah, to find Jane Austen and Emily Bronte. Fill your plate with as much Bronte as possible, so then you can be back at home sitting next to the fireplace, cozied up, roaring fire, rain hammering against the window whilst your vampiric boyfriend sits opposite just staring at you the whole time. Totally normal teenage stuff, I get it. It is a vibe. It's a vibe, and it's also very easy to insert yourself in the story to imagine these things. Bella Swan is a placeholder for the reader, mainly Stephanie Meyer, but some for the reader. I think that's also why she's barely described, physically described anyway, so then the reader can imagine themselves in Bella's place a little bit more. I think what's always disappointed me about Twilight is I do believe that these books could have been quite good if just handled by a different author. Twilight is literary hygge. It's the perfect backdrop and setting for your average introverted teen who loves to read books. And then it's ruined with all the Mormon subtext, general bad writing, and outright nonsense at parts. When we walked out of class, the air was full of swirling bits of white. I could hear people shouting excitedly to each other. The wind bit at my cheeks, my nose. Wow, Mike said, it's snowing. I looked at the little cotton fluffs that were building up along the sidewalk and swirling erratically past my face. Ew, snow. There went my good day. He looked surprised. Don't you like snow? No, that means it's too cold for rain, obviously. Bella really isn't like the other girls. She reads Faulkner and hates snow. Anyway, Edward is back. Stakes. Never been higher. Someone please get the stakes. But aside from the laughter and playfulness, there was something different, and I couldn't quite pinpoint what the difference was. I examined Edward the most carefully. His skin was less pale, I decided, flushed from the snow fight maybe, and the circles under his eyes were much less noticeable. But there was something more. I pondered, staring, trying to isolate the change. Bella just spying on Edward across the cafeteria with like binoculars. Edward stares at Bella for a bit, which is very romantic, and then they're off to biology. Quick aside, but I will always maintain that Kristen Stewart did a stand-up job with Bella, with what she was given. Bella is a blank wooden slate, just as Stephanie Meyer intended. And Robert Pattinson playing Edward as a weirdo who desperately needs therapy. Perfection. Edward introduces himself to Bella, so Bella just gaslights herself. My mind was spinning with confusion. Had I made up the whole thing? He was perfectly polite now. I had to speak, he was waiting, but I couldn't think of anything conventional to say. They chat and Edward slips up. No, I persisted stupidly. I mean, why did you call me Bella? He seemed confused. Do you prefer Isabella? No, I like Bella, I said, but I think Charlie, I mean my dad, must call me Isabella behind my back. That's what everyone here seems to know me as. I tried to explain, feeling like an utter moron. Oh, he let it drop. I looked away awkwardly. At this point, you're probably meant to think, oh my god, he knows her preferred name, like he's super special, they're meant to be. But actually it's because he can just hear people's thoughts, so he knows that Bella likes Bella. Anyway, they have a science lesson about the phases of mitosis. Thank you for that, thank you. Ladies first, partner, Edward asked. I looked up to see him smiling, a crooked smile so beautiful that I could only stare at him like an idiot. Or I could start if you wish. The smile faded. He was obviously wondering if I was mentally competent. Why is the thought of Edward thinking, what a dumbass, about Bella amusing? Do you mind if I look? He asked as I began to remove the slide. His hand caught mine to stop me as he asked. His fingers were ice cold, like he'd been holding them in a snowdrift before class. Right, so if Edward always feels cold because his skin is like granite or diamond or some shit, his temperature's always cold, yeah. In Breaking Dawn, when they have sex for the first time, how would it not feel like someone shoved an ice lolly inside of her? Surely that's an area you don't want brain freeze. Plus, how comfortable would it be to ride Granite Dick anyway? Maybe she didn't notice any chafing because all her nerves down there suffered freeze death. Right, jokes aside, I'm going to have to say this, otherwise people are going to be like, oh, Alizee, you don't know what you're talking about. Right, yeah, I'm aware that ice play is a thing, but the thing is, it's ice, like, warms up to your body temperature. Edward's skin is permanently freezing. There's even this scene in Eclipse where Bella, Edward, and Jacob are at a mountain, they're in a tent together, and Bella's having to sleep in like a sleeping bag with Jacob because werewolves are really hot, whereas vampires are really cold. Oh my god, duality of supernatural beings. And Edward has to sit in a corner and watch like a cuck all night as they're cuddling, because otherwise if Edward got too close to Bella, she would literally freeze to death. So seriously, how the fuck would sex between a vampire, Maya's vampire anyway, and a human be pleasurable? Let me know in the comments below. Did you get contacts? I blurted out unthinkingly. He seemed puzzled by my unexpected question. No. Oh, I mumbled. I thought there was something different about your eyes. In fact, I'm sure there was something different. I vividly remembered the flat black colour of the eyes, his eyes, not just the disembodied eyes floating around. His eyes, the last time he glared at me. The colour was striking against the background of his pale skin and auburn hair. Today, his eyes were a completely different colour. A strange ochre. Darker than butterscotch, but with the same golden tone. I didn't understand how that could be unless he was lying for some reason about the contacts, or maybe Fawkes was making me crazy in the literal sense of the word. Again, Bella gaslighting herself, not to overuse the word, it kind of is, right? But look, here's the rub, yeah, here's the basic gestalt. Bella is super special and different from all the other humans because she noticed that Edward's eyes changed colour, and now as a result of this, Edward is going to take more interest in her because she's probably the first human to ever notice that ever. Snore. Zzz. Go away. It's too bad about the snow, isn't it? Edward asked. I had the feeling that he was forcing himself to make small talk with me. Paranoia swept over me again. It was like he had heard my conversation with Jessica at lunch and was trying to prove me wrong. Again, Bella having perception that just does not feel natural. This is to foreshadow the reveal later on of Edward's supernatural mind-hearing, thought-hearing ability, but this feels shoehorned in. Bella tells Edward that she moved to Forks, a place that she hates, because her mum remarried a baseball player who travels around a lot, so Bella moved to Forks willingly so her mum could travel with Phil instead. His gaze became appraising. You put on a good show, he said slowly, but I'd be willing to bet that you're suffering more than you let anyone see. I'm getting Midnight Sun flashbacks. I'm vaguely recalling that this is the part where Edward starts to think, oh my god, what a delicate little fawn, so selfless, so brave. I want to eat her, but I also want to love her, and I have the weirdest boner right now. I glanced at him without thinking and told the truth again. Not exactly, I'm more annoyed at myself. My face is so easy to read. My mother always calls me her open book, I frowned. On the contrary, I find you very difficult to read. Despite everything that I'd said and he'd guessed, he sounded like he meant it. I was going to make fun of this and be like, foreshadowing alert. But actually, if the foreshadowing had been done with cryptic sentences like this and less unnatural plot point forced perceptiveness from Bella, I think that would have worked better. The problem is, Bella's perceptiveness makes it really obvious there's something wrong with the Cullens, something unhuman, unnatural, inhuman, unhuman, sorry. Me criticising someone's fucking work and I'm here being like, unhuman. But the perceptive, it really hits you over the head with it. But if there were cryptic messages like this instead, then when you reread the book, it would have been more like, oh yeah, it was there all along, cool. Instead of, by the time it's revealed, it's kind of like, oh great, Edward can read minds, yeah, big deal. Hey Edward, read my mind right now. Right, so lab finishes and she goes to PE. Then that finishes and then she drives out of the parking lot and almost hits a car, and then she sees Edward laughing at her, and that's the end of the chapter. Chapter 3, Phenomenon. I knew what I was getting myself in for. I knew this would take long, but now I'm doing it, and I'm an hour in, and I'm only chapter 3 in. Bella awakens to her worst nightmare. There's snow everywhere. She's excited to go to school because then she will see Edward again. I should be avoiding him entirely after my brainless and embarrassing babbling yesterday, and I was suspicious of him. Why should he lie about his eyes? I was still frightened of the hostility I sometimes felt emanating from him, and I was still tongue-tied whenever I pictured his perfect face. Right, She's scared of him, and for very good reason, because remember, it's taking everything within him to not rip open her throat, drain her blood dry. Not only that, but also kill any witnesses. Yeah. So she's scared for good reason, but still wants to see him. That's a red flag. I was well aware that my league and his leagues were spheres that did not touch. Bella, for someone who has half the school falling over themselves to help you out at every opportunity, you really should have more confidence. So because Bella's main flaw is, teehee, she's so clumsy, she finds it difficult to walk around when it's icy. This is a very important plot point. She even wonders whether her crippling clumsiness is seen as endearing here. And that's why all the boys seem to like her. That's her hypothesis. As if you've ever heard a boy say, "Oh, it's so hot when she trips over. It gives me a semi when I see her fall on her face." Sorry, why am I like this? Charlie had gotten up who knows how early to put snow chains on my truck. My throat suddenly felt tight. I wasn't used to being taken care of, and Charlie's unspoken concern caught me by surprise. Bella doesn't deserve Charlie in the slightest. Let's just get that straight, especially by book 4. We'll get there eventually. Might take a few months, but we'll get there. But the thing is, and I've just noticed this, I wasn't used to being taken care of. She has a mum and a stepdad, and yet she's used to being the parent. That's not good. That's a red flag from, what's her name? Renee? A van is about to smash into Bella and kill her, and the first thing she notices is Edward Cullen in a crowd of people, because of course she does. Edward Cullen was standing 4 cars down from me, staring at me in horror. His face stood out from a sea of faces, all frozen in the same mask of shock. But of more immediate importance was the dark blue van that was skidding, tyres locked and squealing against the brakes, spinning wildly across the ice of the parking lot. It was going to hit the back corner of my truck, and I was standing between them. I didn't even have time to close my eyes. Doesn't have time to close her eyes. Has time to notice Edward's face. See that right there? That's called me blinking. That's me closing my eyes. It's quicker than I would notice someone's... Shut up! Edward swoops in and blocks the van from hitting Bella, but then the van sort of like careens around and tries to like hit her again because it's not given up on making this story better. But Edward blocks the van with his own hands, and Bella sees this. Bella and Edward start arguing quietly because, you know, she saw him like over there and then he was like over here and oh my god, how'd he do that? Oh wow, teens and their dramas. Bella hit her head, so she gets taken to the hospital with Edward and she tries to work out what happened. When they lifted me away from the car, I had seen the deep dent in the tan car's bumper, a very distinct dent that fit the contours of Edward's shoulders, as if he had braced himself against the car with enough force to damage the metal frame. Then there was his family looking on from the distance, with expressions that ranged from disapproval to fury, but held no hint of concern for their brother's safety. I tried to think of a logical solution that could help explain what I'd just seen, a solution that excluded the assumption that I was insane. Bella, it would actually do so much for your self-esteem if you stopped calling yourself crazy. Tyler, the guy driving the van, and at this point, the real MVP of this story, is also in the hospital. Then Bella meets Charlie's number one love, Carlisle Cullen. He's super dreamy and he tells her that she's going to be okay, so she and Edward go to a hallway to continue arguing. "What do you want?" he asked, sounding annoyed. His eyes were cold. His unfriendliness intimidated me. My words came out with less severity than I'd intended. "You owe me an explanation," I reminded him. "I saved your life, I don't owe you anything." I flinched back from the resentment in his voice. "You promised." "Bella, you hit your head, you don't know what you're talking about." His tone was cutting. He is so hot and cold with her. Another red flag, by the way. He was staring at me incredulously, but his face was tense, defensive. "You think I lifted a van off of you?" His tone questioned my sanity, but it only made me more suspicious. It was like a perfectly delivered line by a skilled actor. They fight and leave each other alone, and then everyone from Bella's school has turned up to see how Bella's doing, because of course they did. No one gives a shit about going to school in Forks. But Bella goes home to avoid talking to her classmates, even though they turned up and skipped class to go, okay. My mum was in hysterics, of course. I had to tell her I felt fine at least 30 times before she would calm down. She begged me to come home, forgetting the fact that home was empty at the moment, but her pleas were easier to resist than I would have thought. I was consumed by the mystery Edward presented, and more than a little obsessed by Edward himself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I wasn't as eager to escape Forks as I should be, as any normal, sane person would be. Is being a self-aware simp better than being a normal simp? Sound off in the comments below. Anyway, she goes to sleep and she dreams of Edward, snore literally. Chapter 4, Invitations. In my dream it was very dark, and what dim light there was seemed to be radiating from Edward's skin. I couldn't see his face, just his back as he walked away from me, leaving me in the darkness. No matter how fast I ran, I couldn't catch up with him. No matter how loud I called, he never turned. Troubled, I woke in the middle of the night and couldn't sleep again for what seemed like a very long time. After that, he was in my dreams nearly every night, but always on the periphery, never within reach. Wow, it's symbolic of how Bella feels so inferior to Edward all the time and feels that she's never going to be in his league. He's always going to be out of her league. So Tyler, the original MVP, has turned into a simp and is literally following Bella around in between classes, and Mike and Eric don't like him for that because they're also competing for #1 simp position. But sure, Stephanie Meyer, please keep reiterating that Bella is just your average, like, everyday, normal, relatable girl. I wondered to myself why no one else had seen him standing so far away before he was suddenly impossibly saving my life. With chagrin, I realised the probable cause. No one else was aware of Edward as I always was. No one else watched him the way I did. How pitiful. Is that our first chagrin? Very interesting. Very exciting. Edward won't talk to Bella at all anymore, and I don't even know why, except for him being a stroppy git who needs to grow up even if he is a centurion. So he's ignoring her and she's miserable about it. She barely knows him. This is not healthy behaviour. She calls her bad mood a depression over a guy she's only had about 3 conversations with. Go away, Bella. There's some drama amongst Bella's friends, but fear not, dear reader, this will not take away attention from Bella, for the drama is, in fact, about Bella. She's so interesting that other people's drama is about her. So Jess had asked Mike to the spring dance, and he'd said maybe because he wants Bella to ask him to go, because the girls have to ask the boys for the spring dance, but Bella doesn't want to go to the dance because, like everything, she hates dances. To be fair, I don't like dancing either. Teehee, we're both so quirky. But actually, I like singing, not dancing. So Bella, go fuck yourself. Anyway, Edward is totally eavesdropping on Bella and Mike's conversation, and Edward gets jealous. Did I, for a second, think it was the tiniest bit cute? Yes, I did, until I remembered that he's from Bella's great-granddad's generation. Then it's less cute, huh? Bella is going to Seattle that Saturday instead of going to the dance, and then Edward stares at her, so they just stare at each other for a bit. Can you hear my sanity slipping? I looked like it's bad enough to read it, but then to have to reread it, write a script, and then repeat what you've written down on camera. I looked down at my book as soon as his eyes released me, trying to find my place. Cowardly as ever, I shifted my hair over my right shoulder to hide my face. I couldn't believe the rush of emotion pulsing through me. Just sounds like she's horny. Just because he'd happened to look at me for the first time in a half dozen weeks. I couldn't allow him to have this level of influence over me. It was pathetic, more than pathetic. It was unhealthy. She's aware, but she needs an intervention. She needs help. Anyway, Edward speaks to her, and he's all, "Soz, I'm being rude, but it's better if we're not friends." And then Bella is all, "I bet you wish you just let that van kill me," because that's a really normal thing to say to someone else, isn't it? I turned my head sharply away from him, clenching my jaw against all the wild accusations I wanted to hurl at him. I gathered my books together, then stood and walked to the door. I meant to dramatically sweep out of the room. But of course, I caught the toe of my boot on the door jamb and jerked my books. I stood there for a moment thinking about leaving them. Then I sighed and bent to pick them up. He was there. He'd already stacked them into a pile. He handed them to me, his face hard. He's not even trying to be human because he's not hiding his super speed from her. Because, like, how long did that really take? That was very quick. He says they shouldn't be friends because we know he's a vampire. We know he's got to protect the secret. And yet, here he is flitting around the place like it's no one's business. Doing what he wants. Inconsistent. Bella goes to the gym and then she goes to her truck and Eric is waiting for her because he wants her to ask her out to the dance as well. He needs to get a life. Babes, she's just not that into you. XOXO. She rejects him again and Edward overhears this and laughs. They get in their respective vehicles, but Edward cuts Bella off. So Tyler has enough time, Tyler, the van man, to ask her out as well. Never before has a character risen so high to fall so quick as Tyler. Bella goes home and Jess calls her to be like, "Oh my god, Mike asked me to the dance," or no, accepted her invitation to the dance. And Bella suggests matchmaking Angela and Lauren with Eric and Tyler. And then we get this internal nonsense. After I hung up, I tried to concentrate on dinner, dicing the chicken especially. I didn't want to take another trip to the emergency room, but my head was spinning, trying to analyse every word Edward had spoken today. What did he mean it was better if we weren't friends? My stomach twisted as I realised what he must have meant. He must see how absorbed I was by him. He must not want me to lead me on. So we couldn't even be friends because he wasn't interested in me at all. Of course he wasn't interested in me, I thought angrily, my eyes stinging, a delayed reaction to the onions. Yeah, I believe you. Thousands weren't. I wasn't interesting. And he was interesting and brilliant and mysterious and perfect and beautiful and possibly able to lift full-size vans with one hand. Well, that was fine. I could leave him alone. I would leave him alone. I would get through my self-imposed sentence here in Purgatory, and then hopefully some school in the southwest, or possibly Hawaii, would offer me a scholarship. Why would they just offer her a scholarship if she's not that brilliant? I'm entitled. I focused my thoughts on sunny beaches and palm trees as I finished the enchiladas and put them in the oven. How is she letting some dude she barely knows, or just in general, just some dude in general, dictate like her self-worth? Like, to her, to this degree. Go sit in the timeout corner. Bella has a conversation with Charlie. It's boring. Let's skip that. Bella is at school. She drops her keys in a puddle and Edward swoops in and grabs them before her hands get wet. They say Chivalry is dead. The stakes have never been higher. Why the traffic jam last night? I demanded, still looking away. I thought you were supposed to be pretending that I don't exist, not irritating me to death. That was for Tyler's sake, not mine. I had to give him his chance. He snickered. You, I gasped. I couldn't think of a bad enough word. It felt like the heat of my anger should physically burn him, but he only seemed more amused. This is a nice Christian story, so there's going to be no bad language or nasty curse words, okay? Thank you. Bella says something to the effect of, oh, you want me to die, is that it? So dramatic. Edward gets big mad, so she storms off and then he walks after her. The melodrama, I can't take it. Edward offers Bella a ride to Seattle that Saturday, even though she's all, you want me to die? It's ridiculous. Honestly, Edward, I felt a thrill go through me as I said his name, and I hated it. I can't keep up with you. I thought you didn't want to be my friend. I said it would be better if we weren't friends, not that I didn't want to be. Edward is an immortal superhuman, and it's not a leap in logic to assume that all vampires do view humans as a little bit lesser, a little bit inferior. How could they not? Even Rosalie and Emmett/Jasper, I forget which one, in Midnight Sun, they think that Bella should just get bumped off because she's becoming annoying, like just swatting a fly. That's how they see it. And these are the vegetarian vampires. But as soon as a human could be a potential inconvenience, they wouldn't endanger them because they can just go off and start again somewhere new. But as soon as a human is a bit of an inconvenience, some of them, their thoughts immediately go to just, you know, getting rid of her. Getting rid of the problem. So these are like the good vampires, right? And in the comic series Invincible, the dad, I forget his name, said at one point that he saw his human wife as a bit of a pet. Even though they'd been together for 20 years, he was so much older than her. How could he see her as an equal? And also he's from an evolutionarily superior species as well. So what I'm getting at is, Edward's 107, this girl is 17. And before anyone says, oh, it's like they're frozen in time, they're not, because they still have the accumulated experience and knowledge of living all of those years. If they were frozen in time, their brains would not be able to take on new memories and store them and learn from them. They would have stayed at the same. They're all so intelligent because they've had the time to read books and to go to school a million times. Carlisle wasn't a doctor to begin with. He studied medicine in Italy or something. I think it's revealed later on. He studied medicine in Italy or London or whatever for years. Right. So he's a very good doctor because he studied it for years. So the information sinks in, right? So they're not frozen in time. That excuse doesn't work. They are just older. So what I'm getting at is Edward must surely see Bella as a little bit of a pet. Oh, thanks. Now that's all cleared up. Heavy sarcasm. Yeah, I can tell it's sarcasm from the italics, you patronising. He asks her to Seattle and she nods and then he's all, you should stay away from me though. Oh, we love a bad boy. End of chapter. Chapter 5. Blood type. Bella thinks about Edward. What else is new? Some other stuff happens. The end. There you go. That's the fucking series. Disappointment flooded through me as my eyes unerringly focused on his table. The other four were there, but he was absent. Had he gone home? I followed the still babbling Jessica through the line, crushed. I'd lost my appetite. I bought nothing but a bottle of lemonade. I just wanted to go sit down and sulk. She loses her appetite because he's not in the cafeteria. What is this book? Anyway, it turns out that Edward's just sitting on a table alone, away from his siblings, and then he beckons Bella over and invites her to sit with him. This is different, I finally managed. Well, he paused. And then the rest of the words followed in a rush. I decided as long as I was going to hell, I might as well do it thoroughly. I waited for him to say something that made sense. The seconds ticked by. You know, I don't have any idea what you mean, I eventually pointed out. I know, he smiled again. Then he changed the subject. I think your friends are angry with me for stealing you. They'll survive. I could feel their stares boring into my back. You are boring. I may not give you back, though, he said with a wicked glint in his eyes. I take everything back. Edward and Bella are actually perfect for each other because they're both as moronic as each other. I had to stop to order some food because it's now 10 o'clock and everything's closed. Weird. It's a Saturday. So from his perspective, she's a girl whose thoughts he can't hear. That makes her interesting to him because he's, you know, for the past 80 years, 90 years, right, been able to hear all thoughts of people around him. So it's interesting for him. It's intriguing. But then he, like, gets obsessed over her really quickly as well, as told in Midnight Sun. He probably gets obsessed really easily because he's bored shitless from repeating high school over and over and over and over and over and over. So to sum it up, I think the pair of them are nonces. The end. They decide to be friends. It's as interesting as it sounds. I looked down at my hands wrapped around the lemonade bottle, not sure what to do now. What are you thinking? He asked curiously. Don't get me wrong, I can see the novelty of being this immortal being who hears the thoughts of everyone around him and then one day finds this girl whose skull is so thick, no thoughts are coming out of him. I get it, but I also can't really remember if it's at this point he's decided that he loves her, because that's what he does. Just one night when he sneaks into her room to watch her sleep, he just decides randomly, I'm in love with this person, and then his, for reasons only Ymir knows, and they rationalise it as vampires don't change much because they're made of diamonds or granite or something to that effect. So when a big change comes across them, that's it. They're changed forever. So he's always going to be in love with her, like a first love. It's some retcon bullshit. I don't know. They start arguing again. They cannot get through a single conversation without arguing. Arguments do not equal passion. And then Bella says this, holy crow. And all I said was, in capitals, had enough. Edward tells Bella that what if he's the bad guy, not a civilian. I'm upset. This is awful. And she's all, OMG, you're dangerous but not bad. Heart, heart, heart. Dude, it's a straight up red flag, albeit told in an edgy emo teen way. But if a guy tells you, hey, I'm bad news, believe him, run a mile, fuck off. I don't know why I feel hysterical. Bella goes to biology class, but Edward skips. They're doing a blood test type thing, and Bella faints at the sight of, well, she doesn't faint, she almost faints at the sight of like a drop of blood. However, in Eclipse, doesn't Bella smear her own blood on a tree? So did she get over her own fear of blood? Was that the character development of Bella? That. Anyway, Mike takes her out the class and then Edward seeks them out because of course he fucking does. He's immortal and yet has no life. Edward picks Bella up and carries her to the nurse's office, swoon. And then he gets like aroused by Bella's near fainting. The grandmotherly nurse looked up from a novel, astonished. As Edward swung me into the room and placed me gently on the crackly paper that covered the brown vinyl mattress on the one cot. Then he moved to stand against the wall as far across the narrow room as possible. His eyes were bright, excited. What else am I meant to infer from the word excited? Like, other than him being like weirdly horny. Like, what is this meant to mean? Why is he excited? Stop. Bella feels better and then she has this exchange. People can't smell blood, he contradicted. Well, I can. That's what makes me sick. It smells like rust and salt. He was staring at me with an unfathomable expression. What? I asked. It's nothing. I think this is meant to make Bella look special or something to Edward because, you know, what a quirky talent, smelling blood. But actually, I googled it. Humans can indeed smell blood, so this is all worthless. Edward manages to get Bella out of going to gym. And then Edward also skips class because, like, being super dreamy enough to get your own way all of the time is also a vampiric power. Duh. Bella invites Edward to La Push Beach, but he declines. We were near the parking lot now. I veered left towards my truck. Something caught my jacket, yanking me back. Where do you think you're going? He asked, outraged. He was gripping a fistful of my jacket in one hand. I was confused. I'm going home. Didn't you hear me promise to take you home safely? Do you think I'm going to let you drive in your condition? His voice was still indignant. What condition? And what about my truck? I complained. I'll have Alice drop it off after school. He was towing me towards his car now, pulling me by the jacket. It was all I could do to keep from falling backward. He'd probably just drag me along anyway if I did. Ladies, get you a man who drags you around like a puppet. Also, sorry, what an imposition on boundaries. What about my truck? I'll get my sister, who you've not met, to drop off your truck after school. Let go, I insisted. He ignored me. I staggered along sideways across the wet sidewalk until we reached the Volvo. Then he finally freed me. I stumbled against the passenger door. You are so pushy, I grumbled. It's open, was all he responded. Then he got into the driver's side. Controlling. This is controlling. Bella doesn't realise that this is red flag behaviour because Bella enjoys Edward's attention because Bella is a loser. Anyway, they have so much in common because Bella also likes Claire de Lune. Where? Who does, like, piss off. Go away. Stop it, Maya. Why are you doing this to me? How old are you, Bella? His voice sounded frustrated for some reason I couldn't imagine. He stopped the car and I realised we were at Charlie's house already. The rain was so heavy that I could barely see the house at all. It was like the car was submerged under a river. I'm 17, I responded a little confused. You don't seem 17. It's like Predator bingo. You're mature for your age, little girl. Sorry. Edward asked Bella if he's scary. Go away, please. They discussed their respective families for a bit. Edward is going hiking this weekend. Will you do something for me this weekend? He turned to look me straight in the face, utilising the full power of his burning golden eyes. Gold eyes, not golding. I nodded helplessly. Don't be offended, but you seem to be one of those people who just attract accidents like a magnet. So try not to fall in the ocean or get run over or anything, all right? He smiled crookedly. The helplessness had faded as he spoke. I glared at him. I'll see what I can do. I snapped as I jumped out into the rain. I slammed the door behind me with excessive force. He was still smiling as he drove away. Edward has irrational mood swings, but so does Bella, because why is she so offended over a silly little joke? Grow up. Chapter 26. Chapter 6. Freudian slip there. It feels like 26 chapters already, doesn't it? Feels like we've been doing this for a while. Scary stories. Bella is disappointed that Edward isn't at school. Disappointed is an understatement. The gloom that engulfed me. Get a life, please, I beg. How many times am I going to say get... I want people to count how many times that I say get a life or go away or grow up. I intercepted a few unfriendly glances from Lauren during lunch, which I didn't understand until we were all walking out of the room together. I was right behind her, just a foot from her slick silver blonde hair, and she was evidently unaware of that. Don't know why Bella, she sneered my name, doesn't just sit with the Cullens from now on. I heard her muttering to Mike. I'd never noticed what an unpleasant nasal voice she had. Let me try again. Don't know why Bella. What was that? Doesn't sit with the Cullens from now on. I'm sorry, I'm in pain. And was surprised by the malice in it. I really didn't know her well at all. Certainly not well enough for her to dislike me, or so I'd thought. She's my friend, she sits with us, Mike whispered back loyally, but also a bit territorially. I paused to let Jess and Angela pass me. I didn't want to hear any more. Sits with Edward once, everyone hates her. Kind of deserves it though, doesn't she? It's sunny for the beach trip and Lauren has decided she hates Bella because Edward spoke to her. And then I wrote, Christ, I'm only a quarter of the way through this book. I'm tired. I just accidentally read Eric's name as Edward, so I also might be turning into Bella Swan. Bella goes hiking with the lads, I don't know what this is, to find some tide pools. The hike wasn't too long, though I hated to lose the sky in the woods. The green light of the forest was strangely at odds with the adolescent laughter, too murky and ominous to be in harmony with the light banter around me. Not to be patronising or condescending, but I don't really feel that this is how a 17-year-old in the 2000s just thinks or describes things. Adolescent laughter. Like when you were a teenager, did you think of yourself as, hello, it's me, I'm an adolescent. Hello, Jen. Help me, please. I want 18999. I'm losing my mind. They go back and find teenagers from the reservation have come out to hang out with them and Jacob Black is here. And I was thinking about how disjointedly time seemed to flow in forks, passing in a blur at times with single images standing out more clearly than others. And then, at other times, every second was significant, etched into my mind. I knew exactly what caused the difference and it disturbed me. Even whilst trying to have a life outside of Edward, Bella doesn't. And they're barely even friends at this point. A few minutes after Angela left with the hikers, Jacob sauntered over to take her place by my side. He looked 14, maybe 15, and had long glossy black hair pulled back with a rubber band at the nape of his neck. His skin was beautiful, silky and russet coloured. His eyes were dark, set deep above the high planes of his cheekbones. He still had just a hint of childish roundness left around his chin. Altogether, a very pretty face. However, my positive opinion of his looks was damaged by the first words out of his mouth. Bella is a weirdo. Why does she think so much about other people's appearances? Like, it's just, I know it's to tell us. I know Maya's just trying to tell us what these characters look like, but it's weird. Bella bought Jacob's dad's truck, so they talk about that. He flashed a brilliant smile, looking at me appreciatively, in a way that I was learning to recognise. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Such an average girl that everyone immediately fancies. Snore. Again, snore. You won't have insomnia if you just buy Twilight. One of the guys say that the Cullens don't come to La Push. I was still turning over the brief comment on the Cullens when I had a sudden inspiration. It was a stupid plan, but I didn't have any better ideas. I hoped that young Jacob was as yet inexperienced around girls, so that he wouldn't see through my sure-to-be pitiful attempts at flirting. Pathetic. She's pathetic. She's pathetic. Jacob admits he is 15, Bella is 17, then we have this. Who was that other boy Lauren was talking to? He seemed a little old to be hanging out with us. I purposefully lumped myself in with the youngsters, trying to make it clear that I preferred Jacob. What pathetic behaviour is this? And what 17-year-old would say with the youngsters about some 15-year-olds? I don't believe a 17-year-old would use that language. I just don't. It's not believable to me. It sounds like an adult trying to be a 17... whatever. Jacob tells Bella about Cullens legends, that they descended from wolves. This is being narrated through Stephanie Meyer. Ultimately, I know there was some controversy there. Take it with a handful of salt. Take anything she says about this Native American tribe with a handful of salt. Anyway, he talks about the cold ones who are the natural enemy of the werewolves. But one pack went to Jacob's great-grandfather to make a truce. See, great-grandfather generation. Because they didn't want to hunt humans, and that pack is the Cullens. Jacob admits jokingly that he violated the treaty by telling Bella. A treaty generations old and only took one awkward 17-year-old to flutter her eyelashes a little bit. Is that your boyfriend? Jacob asked, alerted by the jealous edge in Mike's voice. I was surprised it was so obvious. No, definitely not, I whispered. I was tremendously grateful to Jacob and eager to make him as happy as possible. Oh, weirdo. She's so weird. She's such a simp. So extreme. He told her a legend. And now she's like, teehee, I need to make him happy. Need to make the man happy because he did a little thing for me. I am good mom and wife. I winked at him, carefully turning away from Mike to do so. He smiled, elated by my inept flirting. I don't think I've ever winked at anyone in a flirtatious manner in my life. I don't think I can wink. Hello, lazy easy audience. Is this doing it for you? So when I get my license, he began. You should come see me in Forks. We should hang out sometime. I felt guilty as I said this, knowing that I'd used him, but I really did like Jacob. He was someone I could easily be friends with. Bella's awful. So annoying. Chapter 7, Nightmare. Bella gets home and listens to a loud CD over and over again to fall asleep to. I believe this CD is Linkin Park. Oh, great. A dream sequence. I love dream sequences. Jacob is telling Bella to run away in a forest. Jacob, I screamed, but he was gone. In his place was a large red-brown wolf with black eyes. The wolf faced away from me, pointing towards the shore, the hair on the back of his shoulders bristling, low growls issuing from between his exposed fangs. If anyone wanted any suspense for whether Jacob is going to become a werewolf or not, it's ruined by this. This isn't foreshadowing, this is punching you in the face. It's aggressive, it's overt, it's not subtle. Also, the fact that Bella has this dream and she finds out, in the midpoint of Twilight that vampires are real, and yet it takes her so fucking long to get that Jacob is becoming a werewolf in New Moon. She's a dipshit. Anyway, Edward appears glowing and Jacob, the wolf boy, the wolf wonder, tries to attack him and then Bella wakes up. It's pointless. Bella then uses the internet to Google vampires. She also has loads of pop-ups. I think she has a virus. This might be symbolic or metaphorical for how Bella's existence is a virus on humanity, but okay, I don't know. She finds a website called Vampires A to Z. Apparently this was an actual website that Maya used at the time, but I couldn't find it. I did Google it for all of 2 seconds. Let me know in the comments below. Bella gets frustrated at her embarrassing obsession with Edward, so she goes for a walk. Here in the trees, it was much easier to believe the absurdities that embarrassed me indoors. Nothing had changed in this forest for thousands of years, and all the myths and legends of 100 different lands seemed much more likely in this green haze than they had in my clear-cut bedroom. I liked this. I liked this observation. I liked this passage. I thought it was decent. Don't say I'm never nice to you, Maya. Bella decides that the Cullens might be vampires, but she still wants to get to know Edward, because of course she does. We've already got through one battery. And we're not even halfway through. I opened the window, surprised when it opened silently without sticking, not having opened it in who knows how many years, and sucked in the relatively dry air. And we know from Midnight Sun that this is because Edward oiled the joints for when he spies on Bella when he sleeps and goes through the window. Creepy. Do you know what's so creepy about that, besides the obvious stalker watching someone whilst they... Right. Besides that, just how much thought, how much like conscious awareness he has of, oh, it's a bit squeaky this, I'll bring some oil next time. I'll bring some oil next... Gross. Bella goes to school and Mike does this. I never noticed before, your hair has red in it, he commented, catching between his fingers a strand that was fluttering in the light breeze. Only in the sun. I became just a little uncomfortable as he tucked the lock behind my ear. I hate all the people in this book. All the boys in this book are so weird. Jacob was cool until Maya character assassinated him in Eclipse, because I'm convinced she realised that he was cooler than Edward and like probably better suited for Bella than Edward, and that's why, you know, he does the bad thing. But we'll get to that. Bella tells Mike about her essay. Wednesday, he frowns. That's not good. What are you writing yours on? Whether Shakespeare's treatment of the female characters is misogynistic. He stared at me like I'd just spoken in pig Latin. Bella isn't like anyone else in her school. She's very big-brained. You have to have a really high IQ to understand the word feminism. Even though, like, none of what she said is impressive. Like, that is not impressive. That is not an impressive... Oh, Shakespeare's treatment of, like, female characters is misogynistic. Probably, because, you know, maybe, I've not looked into it too much, but I'd assume so from the time period, and we can't really put modern day morals and standards to, you know, the 1600s. Can't really, like, a lot of things were acceptable to do back then. This isn't an impressive paper. If she was doing something about, I don't know, quantum physics, then I'd be impressed, Maya. Mike tries to ask Bella out again because none of the boys in this story understand what no means. Bella tells Mike that Jess fancies him. Then Jess invites her out dress shopping. Bella forgets that the Cullens don't come into school when it's sunny, and then she gets immediately depressed when she realises that Edward isn't in. This isn't healthy behaviour. After school, Bella reads Jane Austen in her garden, but she's distracted because one of the characters is called Edward. So she changes books, and then she gets annoyed that the hero of Mansfield Park is called Edmund, and that's just too close to Edward. What a loser. She falls asleep in the garden. I looked around, muddled with the sudden feeling that I wasn't alone. And that's because Edward was spying on her from the trees like some sort of sloth pervert. I watched TV with Charlie after dinner for something to do. There wasn't anything on that I wanted to watch, but he knew I didn't like baseball, so he turned to some mindless sitcom that neither of us enjoyed. He seemed happy, though, to be doing something together, and it felt good, despite my depression, to make him happy. She has depression because Edward didn't go to school. It's the next day and Edward still isn't at school. Why is the school okay with the Cullens just not turning up whenever it's sunny? I know their grades are perfect, but, like, still. Won't a school, of all places, hit them with, well, we've got to get you ready for the workplace. You can't just be taking off time whenever you like. The girls go out to look for dresses at Port Angeles. Angeles? I don't know, I don't care. Chapter 8, Port Angeles. Jess drove faster than the chief. Oh, her dad. Was she talking about her dad that way? So we made it to Port Angeles by 4. It had been a while since I'd had a girls' night out, and the estrogen rush was invigorating. What is an estrogen rush? It's not endorphins. It's not, you know, exciting. I've never had an estrogen rush by being around the females. Really, I tried to convince her, not wanting to confess my dancing problems. I never had a boyfriend or anything close. I didn't go out much. Why not? Jess demanded. No one asked me, I answered honestly. She looked sceptical. People ask you out here, she reminded me, and you still tell them no. We were in the junior section now, scanning the racks for dress-up clothes. Well, except for Tyler, Angela amended quietly. Excuse me, I gasped. What did you say? Tyler told everyone he's taking you to prom. Jessica informed me with suspicious eyes. He said, what? I sounded like I was choking. What is wrong with the boys in this book? How does he think that would work? Bella goes off alone to find a bookstore in a city she's never visited by herself, I'm sure, because she has no sense of self-preservation. 4 men begin following and harassing Bella, and they herd her to trap her, but luckily Edward sweeps in to save the day. Edward is feeling murderous, so Bella chills him out. And then Edward takes Bella to Jess and Angela so that they know that she's safe. And then he takes her out to dinner. All the waitresses fawn over Edward. Bella drinks some Coca-Cola and Edward gives her his jacket. It would suck to be a vampire and not able to eat or drink anything other than... Because I think, so normal food to them, food and water and I'm assuming water and drinks, just taste kind of like dirt now to them. But think about your favourite meal, right? For me... What's my favourite food? It changes. Probably salt and chili tofu. I love like crunchy, crispy, deep fried, oily. What was that? I'm losing it. I'm sorry. I'm a bit delusional right now. And I'm hungry. I really love salt and chili tofu. But if that's all I could have, it would lose that, you know? So it must suck that, well, sure, they love blood, but when you get a bit bored of it, centuries of it. Let's call him Joe, I suggested. He smiled wryly. Joe, then. If Joe had been paying attention, the timing wouldn't have needed to be quite so exact. He shook his head, rolling his eyes. Only you could get into trouble in a town this small. You would have devastated their crime rate statistics for a decade, you know. How are you going to make fun of Bella and then sort of like low-key blame her for always getting into trouble for some men wanting to be rapists? That's not Bella's always getting into trouble. That's some men actively decided that they were going to be rapists in that scene. It's not Bella's fault. Don't make me defend Bella. I thought you were always right. I used to be. He shook his head again. I was wrong about you on one other thing as well. You're not a magnet for accidents. That's not a broad enough classification. You're a magnet for trouble. If there's anything dangerous within a 10-mile radius, it will invariably find you. But he's also using this as a good excuse to stalk her constantly. So it's all a mess, isn't it? And I said, all this mention of Coke is making me want some. The drink, that is. Who am I fooling? I followed you to poor Angela's, he admitted, speaking in a rush. I've never tried to keep a specific person alive before, and it's much more troublesome than I would have believed. But that's probably just because it's you. Ordinary people seem to make it through the day without so many catastrophes, he paused. I wondered if it should bother me that he was following me. Instead, I felt a strange surge of pleasure. He stared, maybe wondering why my lips were curving into an involuntary smile. Bella needs help. Like, she needs help. That's not normal. Ooh, this person might be a mythical legend that drinks blood, and if anyone else followed me around, that would be enough for a restraining order, but it's okay when he does it, even though he kind of also wants to kill me. Tee-hee. Not like the other girls. What a pick-me. Did you ever think that maybe my number was up the first time with the van, and that you've been interfering with fate? I speculated, distracting myself. That wasn't the first time, he said, and his voice was hard to hear. I stared at him in amazement, but he was looking down. Your number was up the first time I met you. Literally admits that he wanted to kill and eat her. But okay. Whatever. Like, let's just... Who cares? They finish the meal and get into Edward's car. Chapter 9. Theory. They talk about Edward's thought-hearing powers. Bella wonders why Edward can't hear her thoughts, lol. I don't know, he murmured. The only guess I have is that maybe your mind doesn't work the same way the rest of theirs do. Like your thoughts are on the AM frequency and I'm only getting FM. He grinned at me, suddenly amused. My mind doesn't work right? I'm a freak? The words bothered me more than they should, probably because his speculation hit home. I'd always suspected as much, and it embarrassed me to have it confirmed. I hear voices in my mind and you're worried that you're the freak, he laughed. Like this. Bella really has her priorities all messed up, doesn't she? I looked away from his face for the first time, trying to find words. I happened to notice the speedometer. Holy crow, I shouted. Slow down. Stephanie, please. I'm in physical pain. Please stop. Holy crow, what is this? Like 60s Batman. Pow! Holy crow, Batman! Batman! Oh, just the way my mind works. My God, I'm brilliant. Enough commentary on my driving, he snapped. I'm still waiting for your latest theory. I bit my lip. He looked down at me, his honey eyes unexpectedly gentle. That snapped and then is gentle, like the mood swings. I won't laugh, he promised. I'm more afraid that you'll be angry with me. Is it that bad? Pretty much, yeah. She already walks on eggshells around him because of his temper, because of his weird mood swings that he doesn't... Red flags. Bella admits that she flirted with Jacob to get information and thinks Edward is a vampire. Don't laugh. But how can you come out during the daytime? He laughed anyway. Myth. Burned by the sun. Myth. Sleeping in coffins. Myth. He hesitated for a moment and a peculiar tone entered his voice. I can't sleep. It took me a minute to absorb that. At all? Never. He said, his voice nearly inaudible. I'm not sure of the pro of this creative decision and interpretation of the vampiric legend that Stephanie Meyer's undertook upon herself to have them never sleep. Sleeping is great. It's nice to break up the monotony of life. Imagine how difficult it would be to constantly be aware, especially with their super awareness. Imagine being constantly, consciously super aware of everything. Plus, isn't sleep important for memories? Sleep is vital for the brains. I guess they're just that special that they don't need sleep. Their IQ is so high. I just don't understand. It makes me anxious to be away from you. His eyes were gentle but intense, and they seemed to be making my bones turn soft. How romantic. I love it when guys make my bones soft. Funny, it's the opposite for boys, isn't it? They angst at each other for a bit over their dangerous longing for one another. Edward takes Bella home, and I can't believe I'm not even halfway through yet. He then breathes in her face and she gets confused. I went to the kitchen and fell exhausted into a chair. I was really feeling dizzy now. I wondered if I was going into shock after all. Get a grip, I told myself. It's like she can hear me. So sweet. About 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him, and I didn't know how potent that part might be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. You can really feel Maya trying to channel a bit of like Jane Austen sometimes, can't you? Also, she still barely knows this guy. In fact, he's spent more time ignoring her existence than actually talking with her. And yet she's now unconditionally in love. Unconditionally in love. Do you know what unconditionally in love means? It means that like he could do a bunch of murders and worse, and she would still love him because it's unconditional. Not being funny, I'm not convinced that unconditional love is a thing. Not convinced of it. I'm not convinced that I do believe that there are conditions to love. Let's not get into this conversation. Like, sorry, if someone really close to you did some horrific, irredeemable crimes, I don't buy the whole, I still love that person because I grew up with them and their family or whatever. I wouldn't. How could I if the person had turned around and done irredeemable? Really, really... I'm not convinced that it's a thing. I believe that everything has conditions. The condition... Like, sorry, if he went out and became a mass serial killer, worse than Hitler, let's go there. He went out and was worse than Hitler. You're telling me that Bella would still love him because that's what unconditional means. Fuck off. Putting up with like really, really, really bad behaviour because you love someone it's not a good thing. It's not romantic. Whatever. Why am I arguing with a book? Chapter 10, Interrogations. It's really foggy the next day, so Edward gives Bella a lift to school. They continue angsting. It's very insufferable. They get to school. Oh my god, I don't care. Jess wants to know what's up. She wants to know if we're secretly dating, and she wants to know how you feel about me, he finally said. Yikes! What should I say? I tried to keep my expression very innocent. People were passing us on their way to class, probably staring, but I was barely aware of them. He paused to catch a stray lock of hair that was escaping the twist on my neck and wound it back into place. My heart spluttered hyperactively. I suppose you could say yes to the first, if you don't mind. It's easier than any other explanation. I don't mind, I said in a faint voice. What a really romantic way of asking someone out. Well, it'll just be easier to say that we are dating. You will swoon. Jess and Bella have a conversation in class about Edward, with Bella being fully aware that Edward is tuning in to Jess's thoughts to listen to. I know he can't help hearing thoughts, but he can help acting like this, because he can sort of tune it out and ignore it. I don't know, it's just creepy. She can't even have a private conversation with someone. She'd had enough of the single syllable answers. How much do you like him? Too much, I whispered back. More than he likes me. But I don't see how I can help that. I sighed, one blush blending into the next. Bella's reply is basically the entire series. Bella and Edward go to lunch together and everyone stares in amazement. You're always curious, he grimaced, shaking his head. He glared at me, holding my eyes as he lifted the slice of pizza off the tray, deliberately bit off a mouthful, chewed quickly, and then swallowed. I watched, eyes wide. I can't recall exactly, but I'm very sure that vampires in this story can't digest normal human food properly, so he has to vomit this back up later. Reminds me of that bit in Tokyo Ghoul, you know, where the ghoul is trying to keep down her friend's food even though she wants to be sick, except that was more interesting than this. They angst again. I don't even want to summarise it at this point because it's just tacking annoying. Edward is annoyed with Bella because she thinks that she likes him more than he likes her, and he's annoyed over that. He's annoyed over it. How pointless is this? Well, look at me, I said, unnecessarily as he was already staring. I'm absolutely ordinary, well, except for bad things like all the near-death experiences and being so clumsy that I'm almost disabled. And look at you, I waved my hand towards him and all his bewildering perfection. His brow creased angrily for a moment, then smoothed as his eyes took on a knowing look. You don't see yourself very clearly, you know. I'll admit you're dead on about the bad things, he chuckled blackly. But you didn't hear what every human male in this school was thinking on your first day. I blinked, astonished. I don't believe it. I mumbled to myself. Trust me just this once, you are the opposite of ordinary. Being clumsy is not a personality trait. It's something that authors will try to shove in to make their main characters seem less like Mary Sue. See, they're not perfect. They trip over themselves every 2 seconds. Ugh. Yes, he smiled and then paused. But if you don't want to be alone with me, I'd still rather you didn't go to Seattle by yourself. I shudder to think of the trouble you could find in a city that size. Edward infantilizes Bella quite a lot. She's been fine for the first 17 years of her life, mate. They discuss what Edward eats, which is either mountain, lion, blood, or elk or bear sometimes, and then lunch is over. Chapter 11, Complications. So they go to biology class, and Bella obsesses over touching Edward's face, and then she almost hyperventilates when she looks at him for so too long. There's some prose about an electric current between the two of them, and I think Maya cleared this up once by saying it was just because their chemistry is so damn palpable. Bella has gym and hits herself in the head with the racket. Unfortunately, doesn't knock herself out and ultimately ends the story earlier, unfortunately for us. Then Mike interjects with some unsolicited opinions. So, he said as we walked off the court, so what? You and Cullen, huh? He asked, his tone rebellious. My previous feeling of affection disappeared. That's none of your business, Mike, I warned, internally cursing Jessica straight to the fiery pits of Hades. But OTT. I don't like it, he muttered. You don't have to, I snapped. It's like turned into The Only Way is Essex. Men in this book have zero self-awareness. I feel like I'm tiring my voice out. I might not be able to finish this all in one go. You might see me in pyjamas tomorrow. Edward meets Bella after gym, and then she gets annoyed at him because he spied on her during gym to see if she's as disastrous as she said she is. He says sorry, and then... But our eyes held, and the silence deepened and changed. Flickers of the electricity I'd felt this afternoon began to charge the atmosphere as he gazed unrelentingly into my eyes. It wasn't until my head started to swim that I realised I wasn't breathing. When I drew in a jagged breath, breaking the stillness, he closed his eyes. He's so dreamy that she forgot to breathe. That night, Edward starred in my dreams as usual. However, the climate of my unconsciousness had changed. It thrilled with the same electricity that had charged the afternoon. I tossed and turned relentlessly, waking often. It was only in the early hours of the morning that I finally sank into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. Good morning, his voice was silky. How are you today? His eyes roamed over my face as if his question was something more than simple courtesy. He knew that she had a bad night's sleep because he stares at her all night like a psycho, without consent. What music is in your CD player right now? He asked, his face as somber as if he'd asked for a murder confession. Bit weird, but okay. I realised I'd never removed the CD Phil had given me. When I said the name of the band, he smiled crookedly, a peculiar expression in his eyes. He flipped open a compartment under his car's CD player, pulled out one of 30 or so CDs that were jammed into the small space and handed it to me. Debussy to this? He raised an eyebrow. Edward spends the day questioning Bella about everything. Such as the time he asked my favourite gemstone, and I blurted out topaz without thinking. He'd been flinging questions at me with such speed that I felt like I was taking one of those psychiatric tests where you answer with the first word that comes to mind. I was sure he would have continued down whatever mental list he was following, except for the blush. My face reddened because, until very recently, my favourite gemstone was garnet. It was impossible, while staring back into his topaz eyes, not to remember the reason for the switch, and naturally he wouldn't rest until I'd admitted why I was embarrassed. Right, number 1, Bella, you are a swine. All previous personality, not saying that there was much, but there might have been a glimmer or something, has now been lost as you mould every fibre of your being to something related to Edward. And number 2, the pair of them just sound exhausting to be around. It's the colour of your eyes today, I sighed, surrendering, staring down at my hands as I fiddled with a piece of my hair. I suppose if you'd asked me in 2 weeks, I'd say onyx. I'd given more information than necessary in my unwilling honesty, and I worried it would provoke the strange anger that flared whenever I slipped and revealed too clearly how obsessed I was. I was worried it would provoke the strange anger. Again, this is not good. Tiptoeing around Edward, being constantly worried about his reactions. Exhausting and toxic. I tried to describe impossible things like the scent of creosote. Bitter, slightly resinous, but still pleasant. I had to Google what creosote is, and it's a thick liquid commonly used to preserve wood, also a pesticide. I'm not sure why Bella is missing this scent, but okay. It's twilight, Edward murmured, looking at the western horizon, obscured as it was with clouds. His voice was thoughtful, as if his mind were somewhere far away. I stared at him as he gazed unseeingly out the windshield. He did it! He did that thing! He said the name of the book! Anyway, Billy, Black, Jacob and Charlie show up. Billy still stared at me with intense, anxious eyes. I groaned internally. Had Billy recognised Edward so easily? Could he really believe the impossible legends his son had scoffed at? The answer was clear in Billy's eyes. Yes. Yes, he could. I know Billy gets a little bit insufferable with this, but that's because we see it from Bella's perspective. So let's see it from Billy's perspective. He knows that the Cullens aren't human. He knows that they are vampires. He also knows they claim to not hunt humans, but how sure can he really be of that? And now one of them is getting close to his best friend's vulnerable teenage daughter. What's he meant to think? Is he meant to just switch off, not give a shit, mind his own business, even though he knows Bella's life is in constant danger, and that is constant danger that Edward himself admits. Anyway, Bella runs away from Billy and goes to the kitchen to make grilled cheeses. She's always cooking. Cooking is a good life skill for anyone to know. Like, gender aside, men, women, everyone else, everyone should know how to cook. Good life skill, right? In any other book, I wouldn't give a shit, but this is Twilight with all the Mormon subtext. Ooh, be a good future wifely. Ooh, underlying. Ooh, very suspicious to me. Guess that explains it then, he said. I wondered why my dad was acting so strange. That's right, I faked an innocent expression. He doesn't like the Cullens. Superstitious old man, Jacob muttered under his breath. You don't think he'd say anything to Charlie? I couldn't help asking, the words coming out in a low rush. Jacob stared at me for a moment. I couldn't read the expression in his dark eyes. I doubt it, he finally answered. I think Charlie chewed him out pretty good last time. They haven't spoken much since. Tonight is sort of a reunion, I think. I don't think he'd bring it up again. The way Charlie defends Carlisle. Heart eyes. Billy says nothing to Charlie about Edward and they go home. Dad, you're doing a great job, I smiled, hoping my relief didn't show. I've never minded being alone. I'm too much like you. I winked at him and he smiled his crinkly-eyed smile. Bella winks a lot and I'm having a hard time imagining her doing it and imagining also Kristen Stewart winking convincingly. Edward picks Bella up for school and he says that he's going to leave with Alice after lunch so they can go hunting so he doesn't accidentally eat Bella on their day together tomorrow. I changed the subject. What time will I see you tomorrow? I asked, already depressed by the thought of him leaving. Now, the codependence is breathtaking. Apart from Alice, the rest of the Cullens do not understand Edward's obsession with Bella. Me either, Cullens. Me either. Edward shook his head slowly, rolling his eyes towards the ceiling before he met my gaze again. I told you, you don't see yourself clearly at all. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You fascinate me. Stop trying to convince me that Bella is interesting, because I can see into her thoughts through the story, and I know she's not. Rosalie especially dislikes Bella. His face was tight as he explained. I'm sorry about that. She's just worried. You see, it's dangerous for more than just me if, after spending so much time with you so publicly, he looked down. If this ends badly. He dropped his head into his hands as he had that night in Port Angeles. His anguish was plain. I yearned to comfort him, but I was at a loss to know how. My hand reached towards him involuntary. By if it ends badly, he means if he murders Bella. She's aware of this, and yet her first instinct is to comfort him over her possibly dying. I don't know why Edward wants to listen to her brain so badly, considering it doesn't fucking work. Bella and Alice finally meet, and it's nothing worth noting. It's not interesting. Bella goes to the gym. Mike oversteps more boundaries. Are you going to the dance with Cullen? He asked, suddenly sulky. No, I'm not going to the dance at all. What are you doing then? He asked, too interested. My natural urge was to turn to butt out. Instead, I lied brightly. Laundry, and then I have to study for the trig test or I'm going to fail. Is Cullen helping you study? No one in this book is normal except for Charlie a little bit sometimes. And I say here, oof, I'll level with you all. I'm 50% through this. We're at the 50% mark. And I'm tired of being like, she goes to school, she goes home, she cooks dinner, but I have to for the context. Help. Help me now. This is arduous. She goes home, she lies to people about cancelling her trip to Seattle on Saturday, I think it was. I don't know why I'm supposed to care about this. And what was my other choice? To cut him out of my life? Intolerable. Besides, since I'd come to Forks, it really seemed like my life was about him. Knows guy for 3 months or less. Life comes all about him. Great message for teenage girls everywhere. I was relieved when it was late enough to be acceptable for bedtime. I knew I was far too stressed to sleep, so I did something I'd never done before. I deliberately took unnecessary cold medicine. The kind that knocked me out for a good 8 hours. I normally wouldn't condone that type of behaviour in myself, but tomorrow would be complicated enough without me being loopy from sleep deprivation. What an odd thing to include in this book. Took some sleep meds to knock me... Don't you think that's weird? Don't you think that's a little bit like... Maya? Really? Really? So odd. I peeked out the window again, but nothing had changed. I had just finished brushing my teeth and was heading back downstairs when a quiet knock sent my heart thudding against my ribcage. Among many other reasons, I don't think that Edward being with Bella is good for Bella because she will have a heart attack one day if this keeps up. Like, it's a good thing that she did get turned into a vampire. Because otherwise, just being around him would have given her such bad heart problems later in life. Edward and Bella drive somewhere in the wilderness to go hiking. I won't let you get lost, he turned then with a mocking smile. I stifled a gasp. His white shirt was sleeveless and he wore it unbuttoned so that the smooth white skin of his throat flowed uninterrupted over the marble contours of his chest, his perfect musculature, no longer merely hinting at... I can't even read. The words are all just moulded into one marble statue. At behind concealing clothes. He was too perfect, I realised, with a piercing stab of despair. There was no way this godlike creature could be meant for me. Enough with the prose already. It's boring. It's boring. It's just boring to read. It all moulds into the same thing. They get to the meadow and then the chapter ends on a cliffhanger of Edward walking out into the sunlight. Chapter 13, Confessions. Edward in the sunlight was shocking. I couldn't get used to it, though I'd been staring at him all afternoon. His skin, white, despite the faint flush from yesterday's hunting trip, literally sparkled like thousands of tiny diamonds were embedded in the surface. He lay perfectly still in the grass, his shirt open over his sculpted, incandescent chest, his scintillating arms bare. Ooh, scintillating iron, fuck. Ooh, look at those sexy, ooh, yes, sorry. His glistening, pale lavender lids were shut, though of course he didn't sleep. A perfect... Do you know why I'm cracking up a bit? Because it's one thing to like... It's a different experience to read it, imagine it, write some, I'd like to say, witty retort about it. It's another thing to read it out loud and the words sort of actualize, come into existence. You get more of a feel. Finally, my food is here. I'm dedicated to this. I'll do a little bit more before I go off and eat. You get a different feel for it when you read it out. You can hear how some of it sounds just daft or a little bit ludicrous better than just reading it in your head. Because after a while of just, reading it internally, I do think it kind of all blurs into one. So, this story. A perfect statue, carved in some unknown stone, smooth like marble, glittering like crystal. I still don't understand why Stephanie Meyer took this new artistic direction with vampires. I don't know. I don't know. At least she tried something new. I inched closer, stretched out my whole hand now to trace the contours of his forearm with my fingertips. I saw that my fingers trembled and knew it wouldn't escape his notice. Do you mind? I asked, for he had closed his eyes again. No, he said without opening his eyes. You can't imagine how that feels, he sighed. This is foreplay, isn't it? This is Stephanie Meyer's idea of foreplay. Poor Meyer. Bella almost kisses Edward, so he runs away to a tree because he gets a venom boner. And now we are at the bit where he beats up a tree to prove something. I'm the world's best predator, aren't I? Everything about me invites you in. My voice, my face, even my smell. As if I need any of that. Unexpectedly, he was on his feet, bounding away, instantly out of sight, only to appear beneath the same tree as before, having circled the meadow in half a second. As if you could outrun me. He laughed bitterly. He reached up with one hand and with a deafening crack, effortlessly ripped a 2-foot thick branch from the trunk of the spruce. He balanced it in that hand for a moment and then threw it with blinding speed, shattering it against another huge tree which shook and trembled at the blow. And he was in front of me again, standing 2 feet away, still as stone. As if you could fight me off, he said gently. I sat without moving, more frightened of him than I had ever been. I'd never seen him so completely freed of that carefully cultivated facade. He'd never been less human or more beautiful. Face ashen, eyes wide, I sat like a bird locked in the eyes of a snake. So, it's the next day. Where were we? All jokes aside, I'm very sure that this is an abusive action. Indirect physicality, like indirect physical aggression. Like if people have an argument and they start throwing things near each other but not at each other, it's still abusive actions. Bella is also now scared because Edward had a tantrum and beat up a tree. This scene also reminds me of a point that I made in my Midnight Sun video, and I'm going to make it here again because I love to repeat myself. I think Maya's vampires are far too overpowered. To the point that it doesn't make sense to me why they lead these double lives, these hidden lives, when any one of them has enough power, physical power, to overthrow an entire government. I don't know why they bother keeping to the shadows. A single vampire is fast and powerful enough to take down tanks, fighter jets, and they don't have the original, let's say, major drawback, Achilles heel of burning up in the sunlight. They just sparkle. They just glitter harmlessly. Sunlight doesn't do anything bad to them, so they don't have that hindrance. So why are they bothering to lead double lives? Normal humans can't kill them. I don't know if this is explored. I can't remember if this line of thinking is explored properly. Probably some nonsense. I guess we'll find out in the subsequent videos, but I just don't get it. Only other vampires and werewolves are strong enough to take down vampires. And we know that the majority of the other vampires see humans just as cattle, as inferior, and they feed from them. The Cullens are vegetarian vampires, but they're quite a rarity. So it doesn't make sense why the Volturi, etc., those lot, why they all live in secrecy. What's the compulsion? Because living life in secrecy makes it more difficult for them because they have to abide by rules. They can't go out in the sunlight because otherwise humans would then know and then the Volturi would kill them. But why in the first place, when it doesn't matter if the secret's out, the humans can't do anything? They're not going to nuke a single vampire, and even if they did, vampires are so fast they could probably run away from the nuke, and radiation's not going to mutate their granite diamond skin. Doesn't make sense, Stephanie Meyer. They're too overpowered. Too overpowered to be living like this unless they enjoy it. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more bogus it actually is, right? Because with traditional vampires, they have to sleep during the day. Firstly, the sun kills them. Secondly, they sleep during the day because they need to sleep, right? And that's when they can get hunted by humans and killed. They're quite vulnerable. Sleeping through the day, they're in a vulnerable state, and a stake to the heart kills them. You can't stake one of Maya's vampires to the heart because the stake would break on their diamond skin. They don't need to sleep, so humans can't hunt them down, well, like safely enough, because they just don't sleep. So why are they living double lives? Why are they not the vampire overlords? Let me try and phrase this properly because it's difficult to communicate what I mean. The Volturi and the other vampires see humans as inferior and they feed off of them. They think, well, we're natural predators. So why wouldn't they be vampiric overlords and have humanity under some sort of constant factory farming state? Seeing as they eat humans, they don't have an ethical or moral code or value towards humans because they eat them. So why wouldn't they just overpower them? Doesn't make sense. Please forgive me, he said formally. I can control myself. You caught me off guard, but I'm on my best behaviour now. Yeah, clearly you can't control yourself if you get into random fights with some spruces, mate. Just like, right, that time that Jesus, yeah, him, curses the fig tree to never bear fruit again for zero reason in that smash hit thriller, The Bible. Also, the please forgive me, he said formally, is kind of a little bit creepy in itself because it reminds us that he's not a person of this time period. He's a man who grew up in a totally different time. It's like a Victorian man being gentlemanly towards the teen that he can barely control himself over. As soon as you look at the context a little bit, it just has such overtones actually, because it's overtly creepy. It's hard to believe, I'm sure you'll all agree, that I'm only halfway through this book. Barely anything has happened. And yet the story is so long because half of it is Bella's internal whining and chagrin. We also get a blow-by-blow account of what her day is like. There was even mention earlier of her doing her laundry. I read a book called A Song of Achilles, and my criticism of that was that it was a bit too much telling instead of showing. This was our routine for weeks, months, years. I have since been informed by one Rachel Oates that apparently the author was trying to be reminiscent of how those old tales actually are told, because they are a little bit told in that way. So maybe it was just the author being clever and that just went over my head at the time. But I did leave it feeling that some more interactions between characters, like Briseis, would have been good, because I liked her. This is directly the opposite, because you could cut minimum 200 pages from Twilight and would still get the same story. It waffles on. I don't want you to leave, I mumbled pathetically, staring down again. Which is exactly why I should. But don't worry, I'm essentially a selfish creature. I crave your company too much to do what I should do. I'm glad. Don't be. He withdrew his hand, more gently this time. His voice was harsher than usual. Harsh for him, still more beautiful than any human voice. It was hard to keep up. His sudden mood changes left me always a step behind, dazed. It's not only your company I crave, never forget that. Never forget I am more dangerous to you than I am towards anyone else. He stopped, and I looked to see him gazing unseeingly into the forest. Constant mood swings are really dreamy, perfect guy. Edward then begins likening his thirst for Bella's blood as being a heroin addict. Edward admits that Emmett has eaten people before whose blood he found too irresistible. No, he was instantly contrite. Of course there's hope. I mean, of course I won't. He left the sentence hanging, his eyes burned into mine. It's different for us. Emmett, these were strangers he happened across. It was a long time ago and he wasn't as practiced, as careful as he is now. Oh, well, they were strangers, so it's all right then. They drank their blood and killed them. Who cares? So if we'd met, in a dark alley or something, I trailed off. It took everything I had to not jump up in the middle of that class full of children, and he stopped abruptly, looking away. I like how he says class full of children, because to him, they are children. Legally, they are all minors anyway. But he sees them as children. Bella is one of those, to him, children, and he still wants to date her. He is a groomer. He frowned down at my hands, releasing me from the force of his stare. And then, as I tried to rearrange my schedule in a pointless attempt to avoid you, you were there, in that close, warm little room. The scent was maddening. I so very nearly took you then. There was only one other frail human there, so easily dealt with. I shivered in the warm sun, seeing my memories anew through his eyes, only now grasping the danger. Poor Mrs. Cope. I shivered again at how close I'd come to being inadvertently responsible for her death. Bella has this weird self-blaming complex where she blames herself for the actions of other people. I know she says inadvertently, but I don't think she should say inadvertently. If Edward had decided to kill Bella and kill Mrs. Cope to get to Bella's blood, then the onus is entirely on Edward. It's not Bella's fault that a vampire found her blood so irresistible that he killed another human to get to her. Stephanie Meyer, why are you making Bella victim blame herself? It's not her fault if a crazy vampire wants to eat her. Edward says he then ran away to Alaska before coming back. His eyes flashed up to mine. I was appalled. I couldn't believe I'd put us in danger after all, put myself in your power, you of all people, as if I needed another motive to kill you. We both flinched as that word slipped out, but it had the opposite effect, he continued quickly. I fought with Rosalie, Emmett and Jasper when they suggested that now was the time, the worst fight we've ever had. What nice people Rosalie, Emmett and Jasper are. I know they're only looking out for their family, but how can you trust them to be in a high school full of teens when they've just admitted that they would bump off a teen because a teenager's life became inconvenient to their way of living? All these kids at this school are in danger because there's no telling when a student's going to start and, I don't know, Jasper's going to find their scent irresistible, or Rosalie, or whatever. What is Carlisle Cullen playing at? This is stupid. I'm annoyed all over again. Isabella. He pronounced my full name carefully, then playfully ruffled my hair with his free hand. Like you'd do to a little kid. A shock ran through my body at his casual touch. Get a fucking life. Bella, I couldn't live with myself if I ever hurt you. You don't know how it's tortured me. He looked down, ashamed again. I should be an audiobook narrator. I was listening to the audiobook of the Iliad. I can't remember which version it is, but there's this English, you can tell he's like this old English actor narrating and he really gets into it. I'll cut your testicles. It was really good. Anyway, the thought of you, still, white, cold, to never see you blush scarlet again, to never see that flash of intuition in your eyes when you see through my pretenses. It would be unendurable. He lifted his glorious, agonized eyes to mine. You are the most important thing to me now. The most important thing to me ever. Why is he calling Bella a thing? The family he's had for decades versus the girl he's known for 5 minutes. Okay, groomer. And so the lion fell in love with the lamb, he murmured. I looked away, hiding my eyes as I thrilled to the word. Edward then starts sniffing her, like breathing her in. He's doing it to become really accustomed to her scent. So less chance of him, you know, viciously murdering her. But it comes across as quite weird. It sounds a bit odd. And then Bella starts touching Edward's face. Careful, Mayor. This will get a mature rating if you're not careful. Calm down. Keep it in your pants. But his fingers touch my lips lightly, making me shiver again. There are other hungers I don't even understand, that are foreign to me. I may understand that better than you think. I'm not used to feeling so human. Is it always like this? For me? I paused. No, never. Never before this. He held my hands between his. They felt so feeble in his iron strength. I don't know how to be close to you, he admitted. I don't know if I can. Then what I wrote is incredibly vulgar, so cover your ears. What he's saying is he doesn't know how to finger blast her because he's a 107-year-old kissless virgin. I mean, I can appreciate that some people are just willing to wait until marriage. You do you. You do you, you know? But he's 107 years old. And if you think about it, even if you've lived to be 100 and he's 100, he's still had double the life experience because they don't sleep. Well, not double, maybe a third of the life experience. A third more, because we spend a third of our lives asleep. They don't sleep. So, get a life, Edward. Just go out, have a bit of fun, for Christ's sake. You might not be so blue-balled. Maybe he's got blue balls because he's always cold. And then Edward gives Bella a piggyback through the forest. Then he pulled me around to face him, cradling me in his arms like a small child. I don't need to say anything really, do I? But this is a pinnacle moment in the story. Now that it's been established that he can touch her without killing her, the weird noncy manhandling of Bella begins. All the vampires manhandle her and it's very strange. And then his cold marble lips press very softly against mine. I still don't see what's so sexy about snogging stone, but hey, that's just me. Edward kisses Bella and she almost jizzes everywhere. I'm not even kidding, and then they go home. Chapter 14, Mind Over Matter. He had turned the radio to an oldies station and he sang along with a song I'd never heard. He knew every line. You like 50s music? I asked. Music in the 50s was good, much better than the 60s or the 70s. Ugh, he shuddered. The 80s were bearable. Are you ever going to tell me how old you are? I asked, tentative, not wanting to upset his buoyant humour. Does it matter much? His smile, to my relief, remained unclouded. It is very creepy that he lived through the 50s and he's dating a 17-year-old now. Come on. Meet me on this hill. It's not even a hill to die on, it's just a fact. It is creepy. She doesn't even know his real age yet, and we are over halfway through the book. Also, what was wrong with 60s and 70s music, you absolute boomer? Edward tells Bella that he was born in 1901 and very predictably she doesn't give a shit that he is as old as her great-granddad. He tells Bella that Carlisle changed him because Edward was dying from the flu and Carlisle was lonely because it was generations before Charlie Swan was born. Edward expositions more about his family, blah blah blah. No, I used the key from under the eave. I stepped inside, flicked on the porch light and turned to look at him with my eyebrows raised. I was sure I'd never used that key in front of him. I was curious about you. You spied on me, but somehow I couldn't infuse my voice with the proper outrage. I was flattered. He was unrepentant. What else is there to do at night? This is not okay. Bella, you're an idiot. And Edward, read a fucking book or something. Like, break into a library and read the books that... That's what I would do if I was a vampire and I had unlimited time and I didn't need to sleep. I would go to the library and I'd read every single book. It would be like Groundhog Day where he reads a page out of every book in the library He reads a page a day, I mean, not just like one page. And he's like, well, I'm done with that now. I know everything about quantum physics. He reads a page a day and he gets through an entire library because he's really in the Groundhog Day for about 10,000 years. That's what I'd do. Also, at this point, I'll start calling Edward a nonce every other page, I think. How often? I asked casually. He sounded as if I had pulled him from some other train of thought. I still didn't turn around. How often did you come here? I come here almost every night. I whirled, stunned. Why? You're interesting when you sleep, he spoke matter-of-factly. You talk? No, I gasped, heat flooding my face all the way to my hairline. I gripped the kitchen counter for support. Why stopping at the hairline? Why not your whole head being on fire, Bella? I knew I talked in my sleep, of course. My mother teased me about it. I hadn't thought it was something I needed to worry about here, though. His expression shifted instantly to chagrin. Let's see. This is my character development. I'm now listening to how words pronounce and then pronouncing them properly.
Chagrin.
Chagrin, I was right. Chagrin. Are you very angry with me? That depends. I felt and sounded like I'd had the breath knocked out of me. He waited. On, he urged. What you heard, I wailed. He has zero shame. And she's more concerned that he heard her sleep talk rather than, this weird vampire breaking into her house at night where her sleeping father, vulnerable, also sleeps just to stare at her all night because he's like some sort of pervert. I'd get a restraining order. Luckily, Charlie comes home to get in between all of the noncing and Edward hides in Bella's room. He sat up slowly so as to not startle me again. Then he leaned forward and reached out with his long arms to pick me up, gripping the tops of my arms like I was a toddler. Why is Bella being likened to a toddler? It's just weird. Again, I'd forgive it in a different book, but 107, she might as well be 5 years old. Bella showers and then her and Edward keep touching each other's faces. That suits me, he replied, his face relaxing into a gentle smile. Bring on the shackles, I'm your prisoner, but his long hands formed manacles around my wrists as he spoke. That one sentence probably was the inspiration for 50 Shades of Grey. I will never forgive Stephanie Meyer. I've got to do them as well, haven't I? My life is torture. Edward goes on about how he realised he was jealous when other boys gave Bella attention. That was the first night I came here. I wrestled all night while watching you sleep with the chasm between what I knew was right, moral, ethical, and what I wanted. I knew that if I continued to ignore you as I should, or if I left for a few years till you were gone, that someday you would say yes to Mike or someone like him. It made me angry. He knows he's doing something bad, but actually it's totally fine to break into someone's house and watch them as they sleep if you love them. It's fine then, it's just romantic, right? Just because I'm resisting the wine doesn't mean I can't appreciate the bouquet, he whispered. You have a very floral smell like lavender or freesia, he noticed. It's mouth-watering. Why is he fantasizing about drinking her blood? Well, romantic. Why can you read minds? Why only you? And Alice seeing the future, why does that happen? I felt him shrug in the darkness. We don't really know. Carlisle has a theory. He believes that we all bring something of our strongest human traits with us into the next life where they are intensified, like our minds and our senses. He thinks that I must have already been very sensitive to the thoughts of those around me, and that Alice had some precognition wherever she was. What did he bring into the next life and the others? Carlisle brought his compassion. Esme brought her ability to love passionately. Emmett brought his strength, Rosalie her tenacity, or you could call it pig-headedness, he chuckled. Jasper is very interesting. He was quite charismatic in his first life, able to influence those around him to see things his way. Now he is able to manipulate the emotions of those around him, calm down a room of angry people, for example, or excite a lethargic crowd, conversely. It's a very subtle gift. Right, being able to hear thoughts or see the future, genuine superpowers. Compassion and being able to love, most boring superheroes ever. Snore. Marvel could never. Edward admits that he can't bang Bella as a human because he would destroy her, absolutely ruin her, get wrecked Bella. And then Bella sleeps. It's the end of the chapter. Chapter 15. The Cullens. Edward stayed the night, naturally, because he has nothing better to do with his time other than to watch Bella sleep. And then there's this weird aside. Charlie, I remembered, thoughtlessly jumping up again and heading to the door. He left an hour ago, after reattaching your battery cables, I might add. I have to admit I was disappointed. Is that really all it would take to stop you if you were determined to go? I don't know where this overprotective, controlling dad stuff comes from, especially at this point in the story. I mean, there's no need for it. Bella has been the perfect little Mormon wife to be. She cooks the meals, she cleans up, she comes home not even early. She doesn't even really go out. She doesn't really go out, so she definitely doesn't stay out late. She does her homework on time properly. She's a classic good little girl, trad wife, So why is Charlie being weird? Why is he being suspicious? And instead of communicating to his daughter like an actual human being, he's meddling with her car to prevent her from sneaking out at night, even though she's never done that anyway. Just weird, rogue, very rogue, Charlie. You were very deeply asleep. I didn't miss anything. His eyes gleamed. The talking came earlier. I groaned. What did you hear? His gold eyes grew very soft. You said you loved me. You knew that already, I reminded him, ducking my head. It was nice to hear, just the same. I hid my face against his shoulder. I love you, I whispered. You are my life now, he answered simply. I have had milk longer than this relationship. I just noticed how ghostly I'm looking today. I don't know what's going on. He threw me over his stone shoulder gently, but with a swiftness that left me breathless. I protested as he carried me easily down the stairs, but he ignored me. He sat me right side up on a chair. What did I just say? The manhandling of Bella Swan continues. I just realised, while writing this, so not right now, but at the time, I just realised that Edward being born in the generation he was and being made a vampire in 1918, he's never tasted fast food, ice cream, pizza, Coca-Cola without the cocaine. What a miserable life. Now that they're all totes official, Edward wants Bella to meet his family. Are you going to tell Charlie I'm your boyfriend or not? He demanded. Is that what you are? I suppressed my internal cringing at the thought of Edward and Charlie and the word boyfriend all in the same room at the same time. It's a loose interpretation of the word boy, I'll admit. I was under the impression that you were something more, actually, I confessed, looking at the table. I don't know what this means. They've been officially dating for less than a week. What's going on? Shall I explain how you are tempting me? He said. It was clearly a rhetorical question. His finger... Please don't explain. His fingers traced slowly down my spine, his breath coming more... My own mind works against me, huh? More quickly against my skin. My hands were limp on his chest and I felt lightheaded again. He tilted his head slowly and touched his cool lips to mine for a second time, very carefully, parting them slightly. And then I collapsed. Bella? His voice was alarmed as he caught me and held me up. You made me faint, I accused him dizzily. All I wrote here was, I'm so miserable right now. No, that wasn't the same kind of fainting at all. I don't know what happened. I shook my head apologetically. I think I forgot to breathe. He makes her so horny she forgot to breathe and almost fainted. I've had enough. I'm bathing this book in holy water. Stephanie Meyer, how can you be Mormon and yet still need Jesus so badly? They go to Edward's mansion. I don't care. Bella meets Esme and formally or informally meets Carlisle properly. It's nauseating. Then Alice appears and gets a good smell of Bella's blood, which is normal behaviour, very normal. Edward plays the piano. They like you, you know, he said conversationally, Esme especially. Bella has done nothing and yet they all like her. Bella could shoot someone and the Cullens would be all, oh, tee-hee, Edward, she's so feisty, love that. Alice already liking Bella is because she can see the future and she sees that her and Bella become best friends, which is very convenient for everyone involved. Rosalie doesn't like Bella, but not for any good reason, such as she's an annoying idiot who does nothing, but it's because, in fact, Rosalie is jealous of Bella. Women, am I right, women? Edward says it's because Bella's human and Rosalie is jealous of that, but we know from Midnight Sun it's because Edward never saw Rosalie, even though Rosalie is very much in love with Emmett, she's used to men all sort of fawning over her. And Edward never saw Rosalie that way. So that's what Rosalie's jealous of. That Edward finds Bella attractive, but isn't attracted to... Shut up. I feel from my memory that it retcons the reason why Rosalie didn't like Bella, as it was explained, you know, maybe in Eclipse, that she was jealous that Bella was a human and Bella, you know, could be able to experience childbirth and have a baby and stuff, and Rosalie's very jealous of all this stuff. It kind of retcons it and makes it really superficial and petty, doesn't it? Are happy to see me happy. Actually, Esme wouldn't care if you had a third eye and webbed feet. All this time she's been worried about me, afraid that there was something missing from my essential makeup, that I was too young when Carlisle changed me. She's ecstatic. Every time I touch you, she just about chokes with satisfaction. Weirdos. Edward tells Bella that some carnist vampires are going to be visiting soon. I shivered. Finally, a rational response, he murmured. I was beginning to think you had no sense of self-preservation at all. Even Edward knows that Bella is slightly hopeless. Not even slightly. Why did I say slightly? Why did I soften it? Why am I pandering to Bella? She's totally hopeless. Oh yeah, Bella cries for some reason. He touched the corner of my eye, trapping one I missed. He lifted his finger, examining the drop of moisture broodingly. Then, so quickly I couldn't be positive that he really did, he put his finger to his mouth to taste it. I love it when a guy tastes my tears, tee-hee. It's revealed that Carlisle is 362 years old. Does he hate 60s and 70s music too? Or does he hate the 18th, 19th and 20th century music? Carlisle's father was an Anglican pastor who hunted witches, werewolves and vampires. Carlisle found some vampires one day, one of them bit him and left him alive, and then he turned. This is when I realised I give Edward a lot of shit for being interested in Bella, who's 17 years old, seeing as he's the same age as a great-grandfather to her. But Edward joined Carlisle first and Esme joined Carlisle after. Esme and Carlisle apparently met when she was 16, and then Esme got turned when she was 26. So Carlisle would have been about, what, 260 years old, between 260 to 280? And I don't care that 26 is an adult for a human. To a being that is 260 years old, they must be a toddler. How could you do this to me, Carlisle? I thought you were all right. Why is this book weird? Why are the age gaps so massive? There's no way that a 260-year-old... So, yes, he turned her, and then they just hung out or whatever, and fell in love shortly after. I'm calling groomer on this. They continue with Carlisle's history. Carlisle was repelled by what he had turned into, so he tried to kill himself in numerous ways, failing all of them. He also tried to starve himself to death, refusing to drink human blood, and his strength began failing, but he didn't die. However, one day he was so ravenous that he drank blood from a deer and found his strength returned. One night, a herd of deer passed his hiding place. He was so wild with thirst that he attacked without thought. His strength returned, and he realised there was an alternative to being the vile monster he feared. Had he not eaten venison his former life? Over the next few months, his new philosophy was born. He could exist without being a demon. He found himself again. Vegans everywhere are quaking. But how convenient is it that there's no cost to their strength or powers from drinking animal blood? If animal blood gives them the same strength as human blood, there's no actual sacrifice in what they're doing. It would be more compelling if animal blood was detrimental to them in some way, but they really just didn't want to kill humans, so they did it to their detriment. If animal blood, if it tasted really bad, if it made them like stink compared to other vampires, so other vampires thought they were weird, because other vampires do think they're weird, but they're still the same, they still have the same powers. It just, I don't know. It's just all very convenient. Edward tells us that vampires don't actually need to breathe. I don't see the point in this either. Carlisle studies to be a doctor and he meets other vampires in Italy, the Illuminati of vampires, Aro, Marcus and Caius. Carlisle travelled to America. He found Edward dying of influenza and turned him. He sighed, seeming reluctant to answer. Well, I had a typical bout of rebellious adolescence about 10 years after I was born, created, whatever you want to call it. I wasn't sold on his life of abstinence. I resented him for curbing my appetite, so I went off on my own for a time. Really? I was intrigued rather than frightened, as I perhaps should have been. He could tell. I vaguely realised that we were heading up the next flight of stairs, but I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. That doesn't repulse you? No. Why not? I guess it sounds reasonable. Edward is admitting that he went off on his own for a while to kill humans and drink their blood, and Bella is like, "K, whatever, lol, it's fine." It's a fucking ridiculous response. Of course, you and I, we have the added context of knowing that Edward only hunted after murderers and rapists. He used his, thought-hearing powers to find that out. But Bella doesn't know this yet. She doesn't know this, and she's still like, "Oh, totes reasonable that you'd want to go off and, kill humans and eat them, hee hee." Shut up, Maya. Shut up, Bella. I hate Bella so much. She justifies anything that Edward does. Anything. Also, rich guy, associated with bats, going around at night time to stop criminals. It's been done. Edward jumps onto Bella to show how scary he is. Sickening. Then they go to play vampire baseball. We're finally getting towards the end of this. Let's power through. Come on, guys. Chapter 17, the game. You just lost the game. So did I. Oh, how annoying. Edward takes Bella home, but Billy and Jacob are there. Billy to warn Charlie about the Cullens. To my surprise, he agreed. That's probably best, but be careful though, the child has no idea. I bridled a little at the word child. Jacob is not that much younger than I am, I reminded him. He looked at me then, his anger abruptly fading. Oh, I know, he assured me with a grin. I don't need to say anything anymore, it's just unnecessary. It speaks for itself. Edward kisses Bella and Billy almost has a heart attack over it. Billy and Bella have a discussion. He pursed his thick lips as he considered that. Maybe, he allowed, but his eyes were shrewd. Is Charlie as well informed? He had found the weak chink in my armour. Charlie likes the Cullens a lot, I hedged. He clearly understood my invasion. His expression was unhappy but unsurprised. It's not my business, he said, but it may be Charlie's. Though it would be my business again whether or not I think that it's Charlie's business, right? Does Charlie deserve to know how much his very existence flirts with death just by being in close proximity to the Cullens? Sound off in the comments below, let me know what you think. Bella takes a call from Jessica and then Charlie comes home and Bella tells Charlie that she visited the Cullens that morning. Well, I sort of have a date with Edward Cullen tonight and he wanted to introduce me to his parents. Dad? It appeared that Charlie was having an aneurysm. Dad, you all right? You are going without with Edward Cullen, he thundered. Uh-oh, I thought you liked the Cullens. He's too old for you, he ranted. We're both juniors, I corrected, though he was more right than he dreamed. Wait, he paused. Which one is Edward? Charlie's funny. I don't like the overdone, like the weird, overprotective trope of dads and their teen. I mean, it's weird because fathers, parents do have a right to be worried about their teenagers. Yeah, especially teenage girls, because the statistics prove themselves, right? The world is wild out there. It's wild, it's dangerous, especially if you're naive and vulnerable. But the way it's played in media, it's always as if the dads like blame the teenage daughters. It always comes across to me in a lot of media that it's the teenage daughter's fault that men want to do bad things to them. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that's how it was represented in media for so long. So when I see the overprotective dad trope, it kind of makes me roll my eyes. Let me know what you think. Is that relatable? I don't know. Edward comes around to meet Charlie officially. They talk for all of 2 seconds and then they leave. It would have been nice to have more interaction between Charlie and Edward. However, some semblance of an actual plot is about to crash land into this story, so we wouldn't want to waste another 100 pages of absolutely nothing, would we? Edward has a Jeep for this occasion. He leaned over to kiss the top of my head and then groaned. I looked at him puzzled. You smell so good in the rain, he explained. In a good way or in a bad way, I asked cautiously. He sighed. Both, always both. I personally love it when boys make a habit of smelling my blood. What do you think period blood smells like to a vampire? How much more of a compelling story is this? Edward is a big bully vampire that can smell whenever the girls at school are on their periods and makes a habit of being a dick about it, and then someone runs him over and he dies the end. Let me know if you'd rather hear my story than Twilight. Bella doesn't want to be on Edward's back when he runs through the forest because it's too fast and it's not fun. He mused as he quickly finished. It seems I'm going to have to tamper with your memory. Before I could react, he pulled me from the Jeep and set my feet on the ground. It was barely misting now. Alice was going to be right. He then wipes his face over her face to calm her down. And then they kiss, but he staggers back because having a granite boner can't be a walk in the park. Edward runs. I want to call it flitting, like from the Darren Shan books. And when Bella gets off, in more ways than one, she falls down and Edward laughs at her. I can't blame him for that one, but then he gets emo over being called out over his mood swings. I'm never angry with you. How could I be? Brave, trusting, warm as you are. Then why? I whispered, remembering the black moods that pulled him away from me, that I'd always interpreted as well-justified frustration. Frustration at my weakness, my slowness, my unruly human reactions. He put his hands carefully on both sides of my face. I infuriate myself, he said gently. The way I can't seem to keep from putting you in danger. My very existence puts you at risk. Sometimes I truly hate myself. I should be stronger. I should be able to. I place my hand over his mouth. Don't. Anyway, they get to an open field in the wilderness and the whole gang is there. Rosalie stomps off to the other side of the field to get away from Bella. Lad. The kids go to play and Esme stays behind to referee and hang out with Bella. You sound like my mum, I laughed, surprised. She laughed too. Well, I do think of them as my children in most ways. I never could get over my mothering instincts. Did Edward tell you I had lost a child? No, I murmured, stunned, scrambling to understand what lifetime she was remembering. Yes, my first and only baby. He died just a few days after he was born, the poor tiny thing. She sighed. It broke my heart. That's why I jumped off the cliff. You know, she added matter-of-factly. Esme tells her this, which is all really deeply personal stuff within 2 seconds of hanging out with her one-on-one. Bit much, innit? They played baseball and throughout all of reading this, supermassive black hole was stuck in my head. But then the other vampires appear. How soon? Carlisle said, turning toward Edward. A look of intense concentration crossed his face. Less than 5 minutes. They're running. They want to play. He scowled. Can you make it? Carlisle asked him, his eyes flickering towards me again. No, not carrying, he cut short. Besides, the last thing we need is for them to catch the scent and start hunting. How many? Emmett asked Alice. 3, she answered tersely. 3, he scoffed. Let them come. The steel bands of muscle flexed along his massive arms. Emmett is a bit of a legend. A story about him would be more interesting than this. Edward sticks with Bella to try to disguise her from the coming vampires. Chapter 18. The Hunt. They emerged one by one from the forest edge, ranging a dozen meters apart. The first male into the clearing fell back immediately, allowing the other male to take the front, orienting himself around the tall, dark-haired man in a manner that clearly displayed who led the pack. The third was a woman. From this distance, all I could see of her was that her hair was a startling shade of red. Their eyes were different too, not the gold or black I had come to expect, but a deep burgundy colour that was disturbing and sinister. The dark-haired man, still smiling, stepped towards Carlisle. We thought we heard a game, he said in a relaxed voice with the slightest of French accents. I'm Laurent. These are Victoria and James. He gestured to the vampires beside him. Laurent asks them what their hunting territory is and agrees not to encroach on their territory because they just ate outside of Seattle. James smells Bella's scent and Edward begins snarling at him. She's with us. Carlisle's firm rebuff was directed towards James. Laurent seemed to catch my scent less powerfully than James, but awareness now dawned on his face. You brought a snack, he asked, his expression incredulous as he took an involuntary step forward. Edward snarled even more ferociously, harshly, his lip curling high above his glistening bared teeth. Laurent stepped back again. I said she's with us, Carlisle corrected in a hard voice. But she's human, Laurent protested. The words were not at all aggressive, merely astounded. Yes, Emmett was very much in evidence at Carlisle's side, his eyes on James. James slowly straightened out of his crouch, but his eyes never left me, his nostrils still wide. Edward stayed tense like a lion in front of me. How fucking hard would it have been for Carlisle just to say, yes, she's human, but we're going to turn her into a few days because she's a new member of our clan? Like, why does logic evade Twilight? It's not a good plot in your book if, like, your plot relies on such lack of logic. Maybe it wouldn't have worked. Maybe they would have tried to hunt her anyway. But I feel like it would have been better to say something like that. Just lie a bit. Just say, yeah, we're going to turn to a vampire. Because it's not out of the question that vampires do that. I mean, whilst there's not many of them, they need to get new members, right? The Volturi in Italy have humans that work for them because they too one day hope of being changed into the vampires. So, it would be unheard of. Edward, Alice and Emmett take Bella away from the field back to the jeep. Strap her in, he ordered Emmett, who slid in beside me. Who's her, the cat's mother? We hit the main road, and though our speed increased, I could see much better where we were going. We were headed south, away from Forks. Where are we going? I asked. No one answered. No one even looked at me. Damn it, Edward, where are you taking me? We have to get you away from here. Far away, now. He didn't look back, his eyes on the road. The speedometer read 105 miles an hour. Turn around, you have to take me home, I shouted. I struggled with the stupid harness, tearing at the straps. Emmett, Edward said grimly, and Emmett secured my hands in his steely grasp. No, Edward, no, you can't do this. I have to, Bella. Now please be quiet. Bella has zero agency now because she's just a stupid human who doesn't know better for herself, which is really rich coming from a group of vampires who are supposedly superior in every way and so intellectual, who really thought, oh, we know that some Carlisle vampires are going to be visiting soon, but yeah, let's take Bella out with us to play baseball tonight, as if plans don't change, and single her out of every single human who lives in Forks. Morons, a lot of them. Also, love the supernatural beings always using their superior strength to make Bella do what they want her to do. Boy, I really hope that continues for the next few books. So Edward is all like, James is a tracker and he's going to hunt down Bella, where? And Emmett is like, well, I'll just kill him then, because he should be the real protagonist of this story. I broke it. Does anyone want to hear my plan? No, Edward growled. Alice glared at him, finally provoked. Listen, I pleaded, you take me back. No, he interrupted. So dreamy. I love it when a guy doesn't listen to me. I glared at him and continued. You take me back. I tell my dad I want to go home to Phoenix. I pack my bags. We wait till this tracker is watching, then we run. He'll follow us and leave Charlie alone. Charlie won't call the FBI on your family. Then you can take me any damn place you want. They stared at me stunned. It's not a bad idea, really. Emmett's surprise was definitely an insult. And he insults Bella. Emmett is the true MC. You're leaving tonight, whether the tracker sees or not. You tell Charlie that you can't stand another minute in Forks. Tell him whatever story works. Pack the first things your hands touch, and then get in your truck. I don't care what he says to you. You have 15 minutes. Do you hear me? 15 minutes from the time you cross the doorstep. Bella convinces Edward to stay in Forks so that Charlie doesn't get suspicious, and Alice and Jasper agrees that they will go off with Bella wherever. I tried to be persuasive. Hang out here for a week. I saw his expression in the mirror and amended. A few days. Let Charlie see you haven't kidnapped me, and lead this James on a wild goose chase. Make sure he's completely off my trail. Then come and meet me. Take a roundabout route, of course, and then Jasper and Alice can go home. Would have been a lot easier if Emmett had just snapped James's neck in the clearing. Bella. Edward's voice was very soft. Alice and Emmett looked out their windows. If you let anything happen to yourself, anything at all, I'm holding you personally responsible. Do you understand that? What? Chapter 19. Goodbyes. Charlie was waiting up for me. All the house lights were on. My mind was blank as I tried to think of a way to make him let me go. This wasn't going to be pleasant. The following scenes are very unnecessary. Viewer discretion is advised. Bella goes home, screaming about Edward and wanting to go home. I do like him, that's the problem. I can't do this anymore. I can't put down any more roots here. I don't want to end up trapped in this stupid, boring town like Mum. I'm not going to make the same dumb mistake she did. I hate it. I can't stay here another minute. His hand dropped from my arm like I'd electrocuted him. I turned away from his shocked, wounded face and headed for the door. Believability, 2 out of 10. Just let me go, Charlie. I repeated my mother's last words as she walked out the same door so many years ago. I said them as angrily as I could manage and I threw the door open. It didn't work out, okay? I really, really hate Forks. My cruel words did their job. Charlie stayed frozen on the doorstep, stunned, while I ran into the night. I was hideously frightened of the empty yard. I ran wildly for the truck, visualizing a dark shadow behind me. I threw my bag in the back and wrenched the door open. The key was waiting in the ignition. Hurting Charlie's feelings as much as possible for very little reason. 10 out of 10. Anyway, this plan works, but mainly because the plot needs it to, and the tracker follows them and leaves Charlie alone. I wasn't being nice, I confessed, ignoring his attempt at diversion, looking down at my knees. That was the same thing my mum said when she left him. You could say I was hitting below the belt. Don't worry, he'll forgive you. He smiled a little, though it didn't touch his eyes. Speaking of believability, how does Bella know the exact phrasing that Renee used when she left Charlie? I know her and Bella are best friends, supposedly. Okay. But I'm close with my parents and I don't know what words they used when they decided to get a divorce. I didn't ask. Is that something that comes up in normal conversation? Hey, parent, when you left the other parent, what did you exactly say? I'm gonna memorize it. Is that something normal people should I know that? I mean, I don't care, so... I got a good look at his mind tonight, he began in a low voice. I'm not sure if there's anything I could have done to avoid this once he saw you. It is partially your fault. His voice was wry. If you didn't smell so appallingly luscious, he might not have bothered. But when I defended you, well, that made it a lot worse. He's not used to being thwarted, no matter how insignificant the object. He thinks of himself as a hunter and nothing else. His existence is consumed with tracking, and a challenge is all he asks of life. Suddenly we've presented him with a beautiful challenge, a large clan of strong fighters all bent on protecting this one vulnerable element. You wouldn't believe how euphoric he is now. Right now, I'm euphoric. It's his favourite game and we've just made it his most exciting game ever. His tone was full of disgust. He paused a moment. But if I had stood by, he would have killed you right then, he said with hopeless frustration. Right, but like, how rude would that have been? If they thought, oh, this is the Cullens snack, and then James just killed the Cullens snack, that would have been very rude, and then the Cullens, they're vampires, so surely they'd be so mad that they would kill him in retaliation, you know, if for nothing else, for taking their thing, their snack. Awful table manners, and how does that even make sense? How can you kill a vampire? He glanced at me with unreadable eyes and his voice was suddenly harsh. The only way to be sure is to tear him to shreds, then burn the pieces. Right, if a vampire somehow gets one of their arms broken, can they heal themselves? Can it heal? We drove right up to the house. The lights inside were bright, but they did little to alleviate the blackness of the encroaching forest. Emmett had my door open before the truck was stopped. He pulled me out of the seat, tucked me like a football into his vast chest, then ran me through the door. And now even Emmett's doing it. Quick, Emmett, launch her like a football, yeet her out of Forks, and then find yourself in a better story, please. Laurent is waiting for them at the Cullens' abode. You can't bring him down. I've never seen anything like him in my 300 years. He's absolutely lethal. That's why I joined his coven. His coven, I thought, of course. The show of leadership in the clearing was merely that, a show. Laurent was shaking his head. He glanced at me, perplexed, and back to Carlisle. Are you sure it's worth it? Laurent has read Twilight and knows she's not. Laurent is all sorry not sorry later losers and then goes to Denali. Edward's tone was deadly. As soon as Bella is clear, we hunt him. I guess there's no other choice, Carlisle agreed, his face grim. If the plan is to hunt him, why split up Alice and Edward? Alice sees the future and could predict James's movements, and Edward can hear minds for quite a while, so there'd be a really good team together. But instead, Alice goes off to Phoenix with Bella. It would have been better for Emmett to be with Bella because he's so strong. That's his superpower. He's super, like, even compared to vampires, he's really strong. So he'd be a better bodyguard, and then Alice and Edward could team up. No? Esme was at my side in half a heartbeat, swinging me up easily into her arms and dashing up the stairs before I could gasp in shock. Why do they all manhandle Bella? She deftly rolled the hems a few times so I could stand. Somehow she was already in my clothes. She pulled me back to the stairs where Alice stood, a small leather bag in one hand. They each grabbed one of my elbows and half carried me as they flew down the stairs. Do you reckon Maya has a fetish for being like picked up and swung around? You know, for a book that has taken hundreds of pages to tell us very little, this part of it goes by very quickly. If this was written by another author, I would assume it's more to show just how quick and fast-paced the vampires need to react and think, especially when against other supernaturally speedy vampires. But as this is Twilight and it's written by Stephanie Meyer, I'm just going to put it down to pacing issues instead. Esme gets into Bella's clothes and truck, so James tracks her instead. Edward gives Bella a hard kiss. No tongues, of course, because that's for after marriage. And then Bella silently weeps like the dramatic 1920s actress she really is. Jasper and I looked at each other. He stood across the length of the entryway from me, being careful. "You're wrong, you know," he said quietly. "What?" I gasped. "I can feel what you're feeling now, and you are worth it." "I'm not," I mumbled. "If anything happens to them, it will be for nothing." "You're wrong," he repeated, smiling kindly at me. "Oh yeah, and how would you know, Jasper? You can barely be around Bella for the fear of eating her accidentally. Checkmate." I heard nothing, but then Alice stepped through the front door and came toward me with her arms held out. "May I?" she asked. "You're the first one to ask permission," I smiled wryly. I feel like I've said the word Riley a lot. She lifted me in her slender arms as easily as Emmett had, shielding me protectively, and then we flew out the door, leaving the lights bright behind us. Alice actually asking permission before manhandling Bella, leagues ahead of her time. Chapter 20, Impatience. When I woke up, I was confused. My thoughts were hazy, still twisted up in dreams and nightmares. It took me longer than it should have to realise where I was. How many chapters do you think start with Bella waking up and end with her sleeping? I cannot be bothered to go back through my own script to find out, so if you've watched this far into the video, please let me know. Please count. And I remembered Alice sitting with me on the dark leather backseat. Somehow, during the long night, my head had ended up against her granite neck. My closeness didn't seem to bother her at all, and her cool, hard skin was oddly comforting to me. The front of her thin cotton shirt was cold, damp with the tears that streamed from my eyes until red and sore they ran dry. Alice times Bella fanfictions are totally a thing, aren't they? Bella has woken up in a hotel room in Phoenix. Carlisle hasn't called yet, and Bella almost hyperventilates over it. I'm sorry, but Bella is a complete wimp. She is. She's so wimpy. Like, these are vampires, and they're much tougher than she gives them credit for, and even Jasper says so. Bella, stop, he interrupted me, his words pouring out so quickly they were hard to understand. You're worrying about all the wrong things, Bella. Trust me on this. None of us are in jeopardy. You are under too much strain as it is. Don't add to it with wholly unnecessary worries. Listen to me, he ordered, for I had looked away. Our family is strong. Our only fear is losing you. My babysitters handled the suspense better than I did. Bella asks Alice how vampires are created. We couldn't possibly know what her motive behind doing this is. As predators, we have a glut of weapons in our physical arsenal, much more than really necessary. The strength, the speed, the acute senses, not to mention those of us like Edward, Jasper and I who have extra senses as well. And then, like a carnivorous flower, we are physically attractive to our prey. Even Alice knows all of them are overpowered. The vampires have venom, and if the venom spreads through a human's body, it will change them into a vampire too. Alice begins to have a vision of a long room with mirrors inside. Jasper's voice was calm, methodical, as he questioned her in a practiced way. What is he doing? He's watching TV. No, he's running a VCR in the dark in another place. Can you see where he is? No, it's too dark. And the mirror room, what else is there? Just the mirrors and the gold. It's a band around the room. And there's a black table with a big stereo and a TV. He's touching the VCR there, but he doesn't watch the way he does in the dark room. This is the room where he waits. Her eyes drifted, then focused on Jasper's face. Carlisle calls, James has gotten on a plane. Alice draws out her vision and Bella recognises it as a ballet studio, the one that she went to around the corner from when she grew up. Bella gets paranoid that her mother is now connected in this mess, so she calls her and leaves a message. She doesn't bother calling Charlie, even though it's been over a day and Charlie would definitely be concerned about Bella's whereabouts, but who cares? I must have fallen asleep on the couch waiting for the phone to ring again. The touch of Alice's cold hands woke me briefly as she carried me to the bed, but I was unconscious again before my head hit the pillow. How cute. It reminds me of when I was a little kid and I'd fall asleep in the car and then I'd wake up inside the house because my dad would carry me from the car to the house. How cute. Just like when I was a child. The chapter ends yet again with Bella falling asleep. Chapter 21, phone call. Bella wakes up. Wow, I've never read her do that before. Bella has another vision, this time of Bella's mother's house, so Bella freaks out that her James came for her mum. Alice looked meaningfully at Jasper. A deep, heavy fog of lethargy washed over me and my eyes closed without my permission. My mind struggled against the fog, realising what was happening. I forced my eyes open and stood up, stepping away from Jasper's hand. It's really weird and slightly creepy that Jasper would try to force Bella to go to sleep against her will. No one has any respect for Bella's Bella doesn't have that much respect for her own agency, but that's besides the point, because none of these vampires do either. Spoiler alert, gonna spoil the ending for you. James rings Alice's phone and manages to convince Bella that he's tricked her mum. It's not true, the mum's not there. Spoiler alert, but they really should have seen through this. James says, Bella, get away from your friends and meet me here, otherwise I'll eat your mum. Slowly, my thoughts started to break past that brick wall of pain, to plan, for I had no choices now but one, to go to the mirrored room and die. I had no guarantees, nothing to give to keep my mother alive. I could only hope that James would be satisfied with winning the game, that beating Edward would be enough. Despair gripped me. There was no way to bargain, nothing I could offer or withhold that would influence him. But I still had no choice. I had to try. I was suddenly grateful that Jasper was gone. If he had been here to feel my anguish in the last 5 minutes, how could I have kept them from being suspicious? I choked back the dread, the anxiety, tried to stifle it. I couldn't afford it now. I didn't know when he would return. I had to accept that I wouldn't see Edward again, not even one last glimpse of his face to carry with me to the mirror room. I was going to hurt him, and I couldn't say goodbye. I let the waves of torture wash over me, have their way for a time. Then I pushed them back too and went to face Alice. This is a big moment, yeah, because Bella's decided that she's going to sacrifice her own life to save her mother, and I feel nothing reading this. I read words like feel the torture wash over me. It does zilch, don't do anything. And I think part of this is, obviously I don't care about Bella. I know how these end, but I also don't care about her as a character. But Bella has spent a lot of time in this story being very melodramatic, you know, being depressed that Charlie Swan, didn't turn up to school that one time. You know what I mean? So it's a bit like girl who cried wolf situation, so I can't take her seriously in an actual time of need. These passages are meant to be moving, but all they do is move me towards border meeting. Bella leaves a letter for Edward because that's all she cares about, besides the lineage care for her mother, I suppose. No letter for Charlie. If Bella did die, Charlie would have spent the rest of his life regretting things, blaming himself for the rest of his life. But who fucking cares about Charlie, right? Who cares? Bella doesn't. Chapter 22. Hide and seek. Alice has another vision. After decades, wouldn't you be kind of bored of having constant visions, or would it be like a TV show that's always changing and you're still engaged with? I don't think it would be possible. I think you'd just be bored shitless. Alice lies to Bella very obviously and says that she sees nothing different. They go to the airport. Bella asks Jasper to accompany her to breakfast and then excuses herself to the ladies' room, but actually the ladies' room has a second exit and she uses that to run away and run through the airport. She gets into a Hayat, which I'm assuming is a bus, and then she gets into a cab and goes to her mother's address. James left a number in her mother's house, so she rings it. The sun was hot on my skin, too bright as it bounced off the white concrete and blinded me. I felt dangerously exposed, more fiercely than I would have dreamed I was capable of. I wished for the green protective forests of Forks, of home. She's done little else but complain about Forks for the whole story, so I'm not going to suspend my disbelief enough to believe that now she thinks of Forks as her new home. She goes to the ballet studio where James awaits. Bella? Bella! That same tone of hysterical panic, and I was like, Bella, are you there? I sprinted to the door to the sound of her voice. Bella, you scared me. Don't you ever do that to me again. Her voice continued as I ran into the long, high-ceilinged room. I stared around me, trying to find where her voice was coming from. I heard her laugh and I whirled to the sound. There she was, on the TV screen, tousling my hair in relief. It was Thanksgiving and I was 12. We'd gone to see my grandmother in California the last year before she died. We went to the beach one day and I'd leaned too far over the edge of the pier. She'd seen my feet flailing, trying to reclaim my balance. "Bella? Bella!" she'd called out to me in fear, and then the TV screen was blue. "Lol, dumbass, get wrecked by James." "Sorry about that, Bella, but isn't it better that your mother didn't really have to be involved in all this?" His voice was courteous, kind. What a nice geezer, really. "How odd, you really mean it?" His dark eyes assessed me with interest. The irises were nearly black, just a hint of ruby around the edges. Thirsty. "I'll give your strange coven this much. You humans can be quite interesting. I guess I can see the draw of observing you. It's amazing. Some of you seem to have no sense of your own self-interest at all. Even James thinks Bella is a moron." There was no menace in his face or stance. He was so very average looking, nothing remarkable at his face or body at all. Just the white skin, the circled eyes I'd grown used to. He wore a pale blue long sleeve shirt and faded blue jeans. So the Cullens all look beautiful, and yet this guy is just some sort of average schmo. Why? What's the point of that? Aren't all vampires meant to be beautiful to lure in humans? Even Alice said so. But it says here, he's so average looking. Is that average looking for a vampire, which is still like a model compared to human? What do you mean? Stephanie Meyer, explain. Remember your own lore. Well, our hopes differ then. You see, this was all just a little too easy, too quick. To be quite honest, I'm disappointed. I expected a much greater challenge, and after all, I only needed a little luck. I waited in silence. When Victoria couldn't get to your father, I had her find out more about you. There was no sense in running all over the planet chasing you down when I could comfortably wait for you in a place of my choosing. So after I talked to Victoria, I had decided to come to Phoenix to pay your mother a visit. I'd heard you say you were going home. At first, I never dreamt you meant it, but then I wondered. Humans can be very predictable. They like to be somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. And wouldn't it be the perfect ploy to go to the last place you should be when you're hiding, the place you said you'd be? But of course I wasn't sure, it was just a hunch. I usually get a feeling about the prey I'm hunting, a sixth sense if you will. I listened to your message when I got to your mother's house, but of course I couldn't be sure where you'd called from. It was very useful to have your number, but you could have been in Antarctica for all I knew, and the game wouldn't work unless you were close by. James just starts killing time by expositioning to Bella. He's meant to be one of the fiercest hunters in the vampiric world, and yet he does the classic rookie error of explaining to the fallen hero exactly how he'd outsmarted him, thus wasting time for someone else to come in and save the day. Pathetic. James expositions some more that he tried to eat Alice as a human. She was locked up in an asylum because she did see visions as a human. But then some old vampire pitied her, made her into a vampire, and then James killed the old vampire. Even James thinks that Bella smells nice and floral, and he's filming all of this so Edward can find the VCR tape afterwards. James punches Bella into the glass, and then she starts bleeding everywhere, and the scent begins to drive him mad, like a blood frenzy, like a shark. And then Bella drifts off. My eyes closed, and I drifted. Chapter 23, The Angel. I was brought back almost to the surface by a sharp pain slashing my upraised hand, but I couldn't find my way back far enough to open my eyes, and then I knew I was dead. We're not that lucky. And still 3 more of these. The most interesting part of this story is currently happening, and Bella has her eyes closed for it. I'm dead. Carlisle, the angel, called, agony in his perfect voice. "Bella, Bella, no, oh please, no, no," and the angel was sobbing tearless, broken sobs. The angel shouldn't weep. It was wrong. I tried to find him to tell him everything was fine, but the water was so deep it was pressing on me and I couldn't breathe. Edward is talking to her, but he's simply called the angel several times to really drive home the themes of sappy adoration and slight religious subtext. Go away. Bella's hand is burning because James bit her, and then the onus is suddenly on Edward for him to suck the venom out, and I've never really understood this bit. I think it's entirely unnecessary, and it's just the only purpose for it is to be as dramatic as possible, because it's lore that Carlisle spent hundreds of years acclimatizing to the scent of human blood so he could work as a doctor in hospitals, and he's now immune to the scent of blood. It doesn't affect him. It doesn't drive him crazy. He doesn't get any slight, ooh, what if I just had a little lick of some of this blood bag? No, doesn't affect him. Bella isn't a normal human to Edward. Her blood affects Edward 1,000 times more than a normal human's would. So they want him to suck the venom out, even though, like, it wouldn't be easy for him to do it to a human, but this is infinitely more dangerous for Bella. The safest and most controlled vampire there is Carlisle. Logically, Carlisle should be the one to do it. And this is done purely for effect. So I Googled to check there wasn't an actual reason. And I found a bunch of nonsense, including Carlisle needed to focus on Bella's other wounds. you know, because she's bleeding at the moment. But he says, like, he does say, you know, her wounds, they're okay. I can sort them out. He's a vampire with super speed. Bam, done. Sort the wounds out. Like, you're not telling me that the other wounds could have waited a tiny bit for him to suck the venom out? Because this is all going on in a matter of like a minute or so. If Carlisle told Edward to do it purely so that Edward could see his love was stronger for Bella than his thirst for her blood and that he could truly save her, then Carlisle gambled Bella's life. Just gambled it, because it could have gone either way, which doesn't seem that in keeping with his character now, does it? I really believe that this plot decision was a wanky, awful moment to just show how like dreamy Edward is, that like he could save her life even if it meant tasting a bit of her blood, blah, blah, blah. And I hate it. Good day, sir. And then the chapter ends with Bella falling asleep. I hate this book. Chapter 24, An Impasse. Bella awakes in the hospital. The first thing she does is apologise to Edward. Please get a grip. Please, I beg. Renee is somewhere in the hospital, and the official story is that Bella fell down 2 flights of stairs and out of a window. Okay. Even though a genuine vampire attack did happen that clearly they can't tell anyone about, I get it, right? I understand the secrecy. Isn't it still creepy how reminiscent of like an abuse tactic this is? Even though I understand the need for it, it still just has like faint echoes of abusive tactics. You know, like having to lie about where your injuries truly came from. Do you know what I mean? In a regular novel, I'd overlook it. But Bella and Edward's relationship has just been ticking off a red flag list so many times that I'm surprised an editor didn't pick up on this. It's just not a great look. You have a broken leg, 4 broken ribs, some cracks in your skull, bruises covering every inch of your skin, and you've lost a lot of blood. They gave you a few transfusions. I didn't like it. It made you smell all wrong for a while. I'm not actually surprised that Edward left her in New Moon, because him being in her life is terrible for her health. This confused me. I didn't see Emmett and Jasper there. They had to leave the room. There was a lot of blood. But you stayed. Yes, I stayed. And Alice and Carlisle? I said in wonder. They love you too, you know. Why? They barely know her. Oh, he said, and his forehead smoothed back into marble. I came to Phoenix to talk some sense into you, to convince you to come back to Forks. His wide eyes were so earnest and sincere, I almost believed him myself. You agreed to see me, and you drove out to the hotel where I was staying with Carlisle and Alice. Of course I was here with parental supervision, he inserted virtuously. But you tripped on the stairs on the way to my room and, well, you know the rest. You don't need to remember any details though. You have a good excuse to be a little muddled about the finer points. I thought about it for a moment. There are a few flaws with that story, like no broken windows. Not really, he said. Alice had a little bit too much fun fabricating evidence. It's all been taken care of very convincingly. You could probably sue the hotel if you wanted to. You have nothing to worry about, he promised, stroking my cheek with the lightest of touches. Your only job now is to heal. How convenient, all perfectly wrapped up. It's really annoying how the vampires can perfectly gloss over and concoct any old cover story so that no one ever gets suspicious. It's too convenient and too easy, and it's boring. He leaned in slowly, the beeping noise accelerated wildly before his lips even touched me, but when they did, though with the most gentle of pressure, the beeping stopped altogether. He pulled back abruptly, his anxious expression turning to relief as the monitor reported the restarting of my heart. Her heart stopped beating for a second because of a kiss. My eyes are going to roll so hard they're going to fall out my head. Renee comes in to chat to Bella and she starts simping over how nice the Cullens are, because of course she fucking does. Even though, in most other stories, a mother would probably be like this. My girl ran away from home because she liked a boy too much, came back cross-country, boy followed her cross-country, then she falls out of the window of the hotel the boy is staying at. What the fuck is going on? This is weird, it's all a big red flag. Wait, Mum, I interrupted. Edward still had his eyes closed, but he looked too tense to pass as asleep. What are you talking about? I'm not going to Florida, I live in Forks. But you don't have to anymore, silly, she laughed. Phil will be able to be around so much more now. We've talked about it a lot, and what I'm going to do is trade off on the away games. Half the time with you, half the time with him. Mum, I hesitated, wondering how best to be diplomatic about this. I want to live in Forks. I've already settled in at school. I have a couple of girlfriends. She glanced towards Edward again when I reminded her of friends, so I tried another direction. And Charlie needs me. He's all alone up there and he can't cook at all. Surely Renee would have spoken to Charlie in this time, and Charlie would have told her about Bella's tantrum, so I don't know how she's buying any of this. Bella, honey, you hate Forks, she reminded me. It's not so bad. She frowned and looked back and forth between Edward and me, this time very deliberately. Is it this boy? She whispered. I sighed, looking away. As much as I love my mum, this was not a conversation I wanted to have with her. I'm pretty crazy about him. There, that sounded like something a teenager with her first boyfriend might say. Well, he seems very nice, and my goodness, he's incredibly good looking, but you're so young, Bella. Her voice was unsure. As far as I could remember, this was the first time since I was 8 she'd come close to trying to sound like a parental authority. I recognised the reasonable but firm tone of her voice from talks I'd had with her about men. Wow, so Bella falling down the stairs and out of a window and breaking her leg is fine as long as the boyfriend is super dreamy. Interesting, his eyes narrowed. What? He looked down while he answered. I'm surprised. I thought Florida and your mother, well, I thought that's what you would want. I stared at him uncomprehendingly. But you'd be stuck inside all day in Florida. You'd only be able to come out at night, just like a real vampire. He almost smiled, but not quite. Then his face was grave. I would stay in Forks, Bella, or somewhere like it, he explained. Somewhere where I couldn't hurt you anymore. Do you swear you won't leave me? I whispered. I tried to control the gasping, at least. My ribs were throbbing. He put his hands on either side of my face and brought his face closer to mine. His eyes were wide and serious. I swear.
So that was a fucking lie.
Bella wants to know why Edward didn't just let the venom change her into a vampire. Wow, problem solved. Except you've been dating for all of 2 seconds and you already want to make an eternal commitment into being a supernatural being. Edward says he won't turn Bella into a vampire. Charlie, he asked curtly. Renee? Minutes passed in silence as I struggled to answer his question. I opened my mouth but no sound came out. I closed it again. He waited and his expression became triumphant because he knew I had no true answer. Look, that's not an issue either, I finally muttered. My voice was as unconvincing as it was when I lied. Renee has always made the choices that work for her. She'd want me to do the same. And Charlie's resilient. He's used to being on his own. I can't take care of them forever. I have my own life to live. Teehee, let me commit to never seeing my parents again, even though I claim to love them, and instead I'll be a sparkly vampire with a guy that I only met a few months ago. I hate Bella. I wish that James had eaten her. Because Bella isn't getting her own way with Edward, she starts to threaten him that she will ask Alice to make her into a vampire because that is totally healthy and not at all manipulative. Edward gets fed up with Bella's shit and calls the nurse in to give her more painkillers, which means we end another chapter with Bella falling asleep. And finally, we are at the epilogue. We did it. We're there. We made it. Bella is in a dress and Edward a suit, and she doesn't know where he's taking her. Charlie had been difficult since my return to Forks. He had compartmentalised my bad experience into 2 defined reactions. Toward Carlisle, he was almost worshipfully grateful. On the other hand, he was stubbornly convinced that Edward was at fault, because if not for him, I wouldn't have left home in the first place, and Edward was far from disagreeing with him. These days I had rules that hadn't existed before. Curfews, visiting hours. What the fuck does Bella expect? And also, from Charlie's viewpoint, how is he in the wrong? Charlie has a level of responsibility for Bella. She's his daughter. She is also a minor. And she's the one that came home after a date with Edward being like, I like him too much, but this town's going to trap me, so I'm going to run away and leave in the middle of the night to go cross country back home to Phoenix. And then said boy chases her, and then she accidentally breaks her leg by falling out of a fucking window at the hotel. How is Charlie meant to react to this? If I was Charlie, I would blame Edward too, partially, and ban him from even being in the house. Edward is taking Bella to prom. Tyler turns up to Bella's house because all the boys love Bella so much. Bella is so angry about being tricked to go to prom that she starts crying. Because she didn't want to go, she made it clear, and Edward tricked and forced her, basically. I never went to my school prom, my secondary school prom. Didn't have an interest in it. Just didn't care, wasn't interested, didn't want to go, never cared for it. I still don't regret it. I went and watched Transformers that night with my then boyfriend at the time instead. If a guy had tricked me into going to the prom where I'd explicitly said I don't want to go, I don't care for it, I'd have just dumped them, found something better to do. Because it just shows a lack of respect for how you want to spend your time and what you want to do. And maybe I'm just old-fashioned that way, but I just don't see it as romantic if your significant other tricks you into doing something you said you don't want to do. I don't see that as romantic, sorry. Also, somehow Charlie is in on this ruse, even though he doesn't like Edward. How convenient for Edward, yet again, still getting his way even with people that don't like him. I sat stubbornly in my seat, arms folded, feeling a secret twinge of smugness. The lot was crowded with people in formal dress, witnesses. He couldn't remove me forcibly from the car as he might have if we'd been alone. So romantic. He sighed. When someone wants to kill you, you're brave as a lion. And then when someone mentions dancing, he shook his head. I gulped. Dancing. I don't dance, never did, not even in my drinking days. Does nothing for me. Doesn't give me the same feelings as it must do for people who enjoy dancing. I just don't care for it. Never have. Doesn't bother me. I like singing though. I'm not entirely a Scrooge. I like singing. I enjoy singing. Makes me feel happy. So why can't people like Edward just accept that some people have their likes and dislikes? And if they themselves personally want to change those likes and dislikes and try something new, then they will choose to. There's such an arrogance in Edward thinking that he knows best for Bella, him taking her to prom, them having a dance. Then again, it has been shown throughout the book that she is completely willing to change her entire non-personality to conform to his lifestyle. But even so, he is so arrogant. This is arrogant. It's not attractive. I don't think so anyway. I don't find it attractive. Hey, there's this thing you don't want to do and I'm going to trick you and make you do it anyway because I know what's best for you, little girl, good future Mormon wifey. But the thing is we know she's going to turn around and be like, actually, I don't mind dancing too much as long as it's with you, tee-hee-hee, because my entire personality and reason for existing is based around what you like, Edward, tee-hee. I hate this story. In Phoenix, they held proms in hotel ballrooms. This dance was in the gym, of course. It was probably the only room in town big enough for a dance. When we got inside, I giggled. There were actual balloon arches and twisted garlands of pastel crepe paper festooning the walls. Look, Forks is just doing the best it can on the limited budget it has, and I'm sorry it's not as good and fancy as your nice Phoenix hotel ballrooms, but Forks works really hard all day and doesn't deserve to be treated like this. And Rosalie was, well, Rosalie. She was beyond belief. Her vivid scarlet dress was backless, tight to her calves where it flared into a wide ruffled train with a neckline that plunged to her waist. I pitied every girl in the room, myself included. Bella, can I ask a question? Do you like Rosalie? I mean, like her. Because you know that's okay, you know. It's 2021. It's not the 1800s anymore. It's not Wuthering Heights. Edward dances with Bella, supporting her so she does nothing, much like the entirety of this book. Alice caught my eye on a turn and smiled in encouragement. I smiled back. I was surprised to realise that I was actually enjoying myself, ... a little. Okay, this isn't half bad, I admitted. Told you. Get a personality worth having a backbone over. Anyway, Jacob turns up to talk to Bella. He's 6'2" now. I'm sure this is very important to the plot of New Moon. Billy paid Jacob $20 to tell Bella to dump Edward. But can you blame him? He knows what the Cullens really are. He knows that... he would know by now, the whole town would know, that she ran away in the middle of the night. Edward chased after her and then she came back heavily injured. What is he meant to think? Well, this is so stupid. I'm sorry, Bella. He wants you to break up with your boyfriend. He asked me to tell you please. He shook his head in disgust. At least he said please. Edward takes Bella to chat. I brought you to the prom, he said slowly, finally answering my question, because I don't want you to miss anything. I don't want my presence to take anything away from you, if I can help it. I want you to be human. I want your life to continue as it would have if I died in 1918 like I should have. I shuddered at his words and then shook my head angrily. In what strange parallel dimension would I ever have gone to the prom of my own free will? If you weren't 1,000 times stronger than me, I would never have let you get away with this. He smiled briefly, but it didn't touch his eyes. It wasn't so bad, you said so yourself. That's because I was with you. I actually hate Bella so much. Then they just start bickering again about Bella wanting to be a vampire. I touched his face. Look, I said, I love you more than everything else in the world combined. Isn't that enough? Yes, it is enough, he answered, smiling. Enough for forever. And he leaned down to press his cold lips once more to my throat. And with that saccharine nonsense, the story ends. Do I regret doing this? Yes. Am I going to do the other three? Also yes. If you've managed to reach the end of this video, then you have my eternal gratitude. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. I think I deserve a few likes for doing this. This has been quite lengthy. It's only going to get worse, isn't it? And if some of you are still thinking, it wasn't that bad, Alizee, you're being a bit dramatic. You're being a bit melodramatic yourself. All right, Isabella Swan, calm down there. Don't get all mopey. The books do get worse. This was just not a light intro teaser, but a bit of teaser for what's to come. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Ren, for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you check out more information about them on ren.co. Also, if you fancy it, I have a Patreon. You can support me there if you'd like to see more of these. And I guess I'll see you in a month's time when I get around to doing New Moon. Bye.